exhaustive agenda, and right off the bat, I'm probably going to get us off script and go out of order because we have some very special guests here. First, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Zahorchak, our Director of Special Education. He's going to say a few words about the amazing students and staff we have working at our Commonplace Coffee Shop here in the back. And then after that, I'd ask the committee respectfully, if you could, to get up and walk over to Scott and Mike. They're going to show us a little bit about the work. We have some students here that they're doing in their robotics club, and we're going to talk about a future event we have upcoming in May. So with that said, Mr. Zahorchak, you want to give a few comments, a little background understanding about the coffee shop, and then we'll turn it over to Scott and Mike.
Yeah, so absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So I just wanted to draw a little bit of attention to our coffee shop in the back there, which is run by Mrs. Dadson. These guys do such an amazing job. We've had a few meetings over here in the mornings, and what an unbelievable group of people. Lori's classroom has, they've been doing this for quite some time now, and they really have a great system running. So if you enjoyed your coffee this afternoon, let's give them a round of applause.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Zahorchak. If we could, Scott and Mike, the floor is yours. Oh, go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the students for staying and serving us tonight. So thank you all. It's been a delight. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Wade.
If I can say something, Dr. Kepich put some items in our Creative Arts Center over here, lighted area. So as you get up and move around, feel free to go in there and see some of our students' work as well.
Thank you very much. Scott, Mike, the floor is yours. I know you have some very special guests, and for the sake of time, we wanted to get you first on the agenda. So they're not here for 2 hours with us. So we thought we'd be respectful.
The way Mike talks.
Thank you for allowing us to come tonight. My name is Mike Dolges, Indiana Junior High Tech Ed instructor. Mr. Scott Harrington, also Junior High Tech Ed instructor, and Mr. Michael Recente, he's the machining technology instructor over at ICTC. Approximately a year ago, we came to the committee and we had a vision of having the first junior high level BattleBots program in the area and possibly in the state. To our knowledge, it may be even beyond that. And I'm not sure.
We can't find any.
We can't find any other program that is doing this at the middle school level. So we feel really fortunate that we've had the awesome support of the committee, school board, and our administration allowing us to do this. And so we wanted to come in and just kind of give an update and kind of highlight where we're at in this process and highlight some of our awesome students that are participating in the program. And so we're going to have them demonstrate a few things as well. So we've created an awesome partnership with our friends over at ICTC, and they have been helping in manufacturing some of the weapon systems on these combat robots. Okay, they're really
Probably not something you hear at the school board.
yeah. But
What have we gotten ourselves into?
right. I mean, these things are complex mechanisms. They're machines that are designed with a lot of high-end materials, electronics, tool steels, aluminums. And so we reached out to Mr. Recente over at ICTC, and they have been just awesome in creating a great partnership, and they've been helping us through this process as well. So what we have here are some examples of the designs that our students have come up with. Okay, all of these designs were made by the students that are in the program.
From scratch.
From scratch. The designs then went on to ICTC, and they have the machining equipment to help produce some of these components. So, Mr. Harrington, if you want to hold up some examples there.
Well, they're doing the weapons, and then we're doing everything else in-house. So, one example, and to digress a little, all of our students are drawing every part on the computer. They're 3D printing each part. These are the drive motors, the weapon motor, the electronic controllers, every part that goes in here. They're taking the dimensions off of the actual part, 3D printing them so they can make a prototype. So then they make their prototype and they decide on their weapon system. That's when we send that to ICTC. They have a 3D printed part that we made. We take that file to them. They machined it out of aluminum so the kids can see what it is. And then we're going to go on a field trip this Friday, and the kids are actually going to see the parts kind of go from inception, idea, to manufactured right there where it happens, which is pretty great. We have the kids get to choose their own weapon system. So these 3D printed, this, and these.
The students participating in the program range from 6th to 8th grade. So we have 6th grade students, 7th grade, and 8th grade students, and they have really done a phenomenal job so far this year in working through this process as we go through the first year. We're now in the manufacturing stage of the program. So we're cutting out material, we're going to start assembling, and our competition is scheduled for May 20th. And we're hoping to really have an awesome time at the competition, and the students will be able to compete against each other. We have also constructed an arena for the students to battle in, and that is finished. It is housed at the junior high, and I can even show you a picture of what that looks like up here at the share my screen.
And as he's pulling that up, Mr. Harley, I think it's important for the committee to know, we had several community donations help us make this come to life and help us build something really unique for our students, for our kids.
So there's the arena. It's an 8-foot by 8-foot arena.
6 feet tall, 7 feet tall.
Made of polycarbonate, which is shatterproof glass material and extruded aluminum.
Who made that?
We did. So that's ready to go. And so really what we wanted to do, though, was we wanted to highlight some of our students and what they're able to do. So I would like to introduce, first of all, Mr. Rowan Cooper. He's an 8th grade student at our junior high. And he's going to demonstrate for you the software that these students design these things in, okay? And they design these things from the ground up. I mean, it's not like we give them a plan and say, replicate this. I mean, they design this from the ground up. It's totally from their imagination. And so what he's going to demonstrate for you is, first of all, if you take a look at the screen there, that's his team's combat robot design, okay? It has the rotating weapon there in the front. You can see wheels. It's got motors. It's got a frame. And so his team had to design and draw that, and everything you see there, they had to design that. And so, Rowan, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to go ahead and play the presentation and kind of explain what we had to do here.
So what we did is we started out by
Microphone. If we use the microphone, the people at home can hear also. We got some people online here.
Testing.
The mic
Test-
already on,
testing?
and just make sure we didn't shut off. And you won't hear it through any kind of speaker, so there's no.
Okay, all right, okay.
While he's doing that, can you tell me how many kids are involved in this
Yes, we have 24 kids,
and how many girls?
4 girls.
So 24 total from 6th, 7th, and 8th,
Correct.
4 girls. Okay.
And
Thank
we
you.
have kids, GIEP, average kids, IEP. We have a good cross-sectional representation of the student body.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
what we did is we started out by creating files and making the pieces such as the motors, the mounts, and the battery packs in files using Autodesk Inventor. Then we began to create the walls and bottoms of our robots.
And so what he's walking you through here, this is called an assembly file. And so once they design each individual component, they have to then assemble all those components into a working, on the left side there, those are all the individual pieces that go into that assembly block.
We then created the weapon and our shaft to fit the weapon. Seen right up there. And then we put them together in a file like this, showing how all the pieces fit together within the robot. And where, and how like we would attach them. And then this would be, then this is sort of how they would all be put in.
Thanks, Ron.
I have a question for the young man. Did you just build the one, or did you build several copies of it?
So I built that one, and then the other teams are building their own versions of their own robots.
Okay, but you only built one, so if it gets wrecked,
Oh
then
yeah, so we built one, but we have a bunch of spare parts so that we can repair it.
okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Our goal on each one of the 6 kids on the team should be cross-trained in every aspect. So when it gets torn up, because it's going to get torn up, if one kid needs to check the voltage because such and such motor won't turn, this kid has to do this, another kid has to do, every kid should be able to do every aspect of the program.
And now I would like to welcome Miss Laura Kepich. She is a 6th grade student that we have in the program, Laura. And she's going to demonstrate a couple things as well.
Okay, so this is the weapon we made for our robot. It's like an eye shaped basically. And so there's 3 holes, and one in the middle for the shaft, and the shaft is the thing the weapon rotates on. And then the other 2 holes are to connect our timing pulley, which is the thing that connects the belt, which connects to the motor, so that's how the weapon spins. So there's a way we find out like the weight of all the stuff we've been building. So you go to eye properties and do physical, and so there's mass and your area, volume, all that stuff. So we've used this when we make our parts to like make sure we're staying under our 6-pound limit because we can't be over 6 pounds. So we've used this to make sure we're not over.
Correct. Our maximum allowable weight is 6 pounds. So what she just demonstrated is how you can do a weight analysis on the part they designed. And what they did was you can set that for the actual material. So right now it's set for steel alloy. And right now it's coming up as 0.997 pounds. So that part weighs 0.997 pounds, approximately 1 pound. And so they have to do that to make sure that when we manufacture this and we put it all together, we don't end up weighing 7 pounds, okay? It's got to be under 6 pounds. So we get into some really in-depth analysis with this software. I mean, some of the things that these students are doing, this is like college level type stuff that they're doing at a very early age. So we're really excited about the capability and what these students are being introduced to at such an early age. Thank you, Laura.
Now, once they finish those, they have to come up with orthographic and isometric drawings of each individual part. And then they have to manufacture the individual parts, and then they have to assemble it. And it starts out, this is UHMW, ultra high molecular weight plastic, very durable. It's actually bulletproof kind of stuff. So that's what they're going to make their projects out of.
Well,
I think that concludes.
how do the weapons destroy it then if it's bulletproof?
Well, bulletproof doesn't
Fact
mean
check
that when
with this in the
something's
fact
chewing
check.
at it like this, it's not going to get chewed up. Right? It's just not going to go have a hole through it.
Okay.
Right.
And so,
So we appreciate you listening to our presentation and thank you for the continued support. Like I said, our competition is going to be May 20th at Indiana Junior High. And we're excited. The kids are really excited. And,
Who are you competing against?
well, we have 4 teams, and we're also going to have Homer Center and Freeport.
When you say 14,
4 teams in-house.
you have four battle
Yes.
bots of your own, and then you found 2 other schools with, great.
Yes.
And hopefully there'll be more in the future. Several, we put the invitation out to about 20 other schools. And a bunch said, hey, we'd like to do it. We can't do it this year. We haven't set up our class for this.
Mhm.
And I think honestly, some just don't understand how to get started. So Mike and I are gonna try to offer an in-service at the beginning of the school year for any, through IU 28 or IU 7, any instructors that want to come, kind of get the basics and figure out if they can actually do it, kind of thing. But one more thing I wanted to say is, while this is a lot of learning, there's also a portfolio and documentation where they are scored on this. And this has everything from plan of procedures, it has all their assembly drawings, it has electrical diagrams, it has everything that went into making that in a portfolio binder that gets scored. And in order to be the grand champion, they have to score a combination of best in the competition for the battle and best for their documentation. So there's a whole lot of learning going on, not just tearing up robots.
I had one other question on the design process. I understand the drawings and how that all works. The question I have is sometimes what shows up on a CAD drawing isn't actually what fits in the box. Have you had much experience with the design not quite working out to fit inside the box the way you thought it would?
Haven't gotten there yet.
Well,
We're getting there. We're close. We got all the
We're
parts
gonna
put out
find
today. So we're about to find out.
I'm sure there's going to be some troubleshooting.
And they have to figure out if it won't work. It's not us. They don't.
Because I know in real world, I know a guy who builds these tram cars for the airports. And they sometimes run into that problem where they do everything on the CAD. And then when they go to the final assembly, I forgot there's a bulkhead here, there's this, that, or the other thing. And so was curious whether your students were running into anything like that.
There's been a few instances where they're running into a little snag and we got to work through that. But that's part of the design process. They got to go back and revisit and redesign and work it out until we have a perfect.
And we encourage kids to fail.
And that's where I was going with it.
Because you don't learn from success, you learn from failure. And so if it doesn't work, go back to the process. What can I do different? What can I do to make this better, make it work? That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, actually, that's my question for Lauren, correct? Laura and Rowan. What's the most challenging part of this so far for you?
I think the most challenging part is being able to remember everything and make sure you have everything right. Because if you do one thing wrong, it can mess up everything.
Boy, that's a life lesson.
Honestly, for me, it was finding out where actually to put everything. Because for how we had to arrange it, certain things can only face in certain positions.
So the design itself, just figuring that out, making the decisions.
But you're confident when you get those parts tomorrow that you can put it together.
Well, Scott and Mike. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a question. One, it's so exciting seeing this from when you came to us a year or two ago to this phase. Just so exciting. So are the teams comprised of 6 through 8, or so there's a mix of grade levels on every team?
There is, yes.
Okay. It's just amazing, like a 6th grader,
It's
that's just
really
wonderful.
cool seeing 6th graders working with 8th graders, and I mean, they really have great chemistry. I mean, all the teams work really well together, and it's a learning process for them, working with older students and learning how to work in that environment. That 21st century skills, such as that, is so important nowadays. These kids have done a phenomenal job with that.
Right.
Well,
I
we
mean, those
can't wait
soft
to see-
skills are part of this engineering as well. Absolutely.
We can't wait to see the next couple of years because he'll be going on to the high school. But we'll have her hopefully for 2 more years. So if she's learned this much in 6th grade, what can she do in 7th grade and 8th grade to build on that and get even better?
So how many more kids can you take?
I don't know. How many class periods we had? Because our administration was wonderful when we said,
You fill them up, we'll find the class period.
well,
I mean, this is phenomenal, you know, that these kids can work out of their age group with modern materials, with really fine machinery, and see this process from beginning to end, and then see success or failure, and then have to repair it anyway. So it's just putting all these skills together is really quite amazing. I'm impressed that your high school kids can do it, let alone, you know, a 6th
it's
grader.
amazing.
Yeah, but when we challenge our kids like this, they're phenomenal people.
You open that door a little bit and let them go.
Yeah, 24 is not enough.
Well, our classes now are quarters.
Yeah.
So quarter of a year. And when we were approached and we had this idea that we have to have this a year long. There's no way we could,
No.
if we had a high school group and they were older, they were more experienced, they can do how to use the software, then it's possible we could do
When she's in high school, amazing things can happen in 4 weeks.
without a doubt.
Okay, but you got to start at 0 with these kids.
So they let us have the kids for the whole year. And it's turned out amazing.
If the administration's in your way, you come back to us and talk. Okay.
Well,
You know, Mike wants to go slow to go fast. But I want to
we
go
have
fast.
had the best support that we could ask for.
Well, and the community too.
Without a doubt.
I know
Without a
that
doubt.
these materials aren't free, and some of the things that you were looking for was expensive. Having the ICTC with your equipment
Is a wonderful partnership.
That has been outstanding.
And these kids can see what it takes to make their ideas come to life. Because we could tell them what it takes. And they can watch a video maybe, but that's not the same as going and seeing it and being a part of it. That's pretty amazing.
The field trip on Friday is going to be a blast for you guys. Just to watch the machines come to life and move. Reading the code is like reading another foreign language, but it's your ideas and it's going to come to life right in front of you. So
it's great to have your partnership in this.
thank you. Appreciate it.
And he's even made us above and beyond. If you guys have ever seen BattleBots on TV, BattleBots has a trophy and it has this great big huge nut on it. Well, he made us one of those. And so we're going to make the base and it's going to be a traveling trophy to whichever school wins.
I was wondering if you
And
want
we'll
to
put
be
a plaque on there that says,
the team names and
yes, for in the year, and that'll go to whoever it is for the year, and that will just travel
It'd be
back.
like the Stanley Cup.
That's exactly right. So it's been a wonderful experience. So
Very good.
we
But I
hope
just
all
wanna-
you guys can make it when we have our competition on May 20th.
Absolutely. And I want to thank, Mr. Harrington, Mr. Dolges, and
Mr. Cindy.
Mr. Cindy again they say all the support that they've had. All we did was say yes. I mean, really. And they have worked tirelessly on this project and put in countless hours above and beyond. So, to make this an opportunity for the kids. And it is such an incredible learning experience. We talk about cross-curricular. We talk about 21st century skills. We talk about soft skills. We talk about, all of the things that go into this, the problem solving, the creative thinking, the communication, the collaboration. And then it's a win-win where we have partnerships with ICTC where, students go up and actually see the things that are going on there. It's a tremendous undertaking, and it really started with those two gentlemen there. And, so I applaud you for the work that you've done.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harley, committee, next on the list, we are going to go out of order again as we have some presentations here. We have Ms. Kate Geiger from the Indiana County Free Library presentation. I traveled over there on Friday with Rob to talk about her, got a tour of the building, talk about how we can possibly partner up. And we wanted to give her an opportunity to come here and spend a couple of minutes and speak to the committee about some of those partnerships and ideas.
Great.
Want me just right here?
Yeah, that's fine. If we give you the microphone, just so
Yeah.
we can hear you online, that's perfect. Wherever you're comfortable.
I'm Kate Geiger. I'm the director at the Indiana Free Library. And I came tonight because the library is ready for greater partnership, and we're reaching to the schools for partnership. And let me tell you a little bit about where we are. I think I know it was in the paper and everything, the years we were going through the better building battle. And then we went through 2 years of construction. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so a lot of things went on the back burner. And we were really poised and ready for doing this a couple of years ago. But now I think we're there. And what we're looking for is partnership with the schools. I know we have Angela McMasters is going to come and do some brainstorming with our children's department for summer reading program. We really target the preschool and, the earlier ages, but we do have lots of activities over the summer for the older kids. Last summer, we were able to do a coding camp, and we had 2 sections in our coding camp. We had the 3rd to 5th graders and 6th to 8th graders. Yes, they were learning Python. So we were really excited about that. That was a partnership with AAUW. And so we were using the Girls Who Code software for that and really targeting younger girls. And we opened it up to boys. So it was a blended group just to make sure we had a full class. And that went very well. Parents were all excited about that. And we were all excited too. We've had a lot of things that I want to tell you about. Our library, about a few years back, we had 11,000 card holders. And I was targeting 16,000 card holders because that's about half our service area, Indiana School District. Of course, the new census figures came out. But what I want to tell you is we hit the 16,000. And what's significant about that is the cards expire every 2 years. So what's been going on in the last 2 years. And so we finally hit that target during COVID. And, that says to me that our community is really valuing the library and making good use of the library and really delighting in the resources that they're finding there. So, and like you, during COVID, we did the shutdown and then opened partially and masks and everything, but we have a lot of digital resources and we were trying to reach out digitally and through computers. We do offer computers inside the library for people who still have that challenge with connectivity or technology. And we offer that in the library and we continue to do that. And we did that even when we were closed to foot traffic so that people weren't left without. We also put a hotspot in at the front of the library that goes all the way to 8th Street. So that green space in front of the courthouse with benches and the street parking area is all now free Wi-Fi. We put another one at the CareerLink building because if you remember, many people were filing for unemployment compensation and needed access to be able to do that. So we've reached out and my goal was to help solve some community problems. And that's what we were all working with. So we're still working with that and trying to reach out into other municipalities around the county and install some exterior hotspots and work on that broadband issue, which you are all familiar with. So we'll all work on that together. But my interest in partnership with the school district, and I think we're poised and ready to do that now, is to get greater involvement for our area families and for the kids. We have some new technology in the library. We partnered we actually came to Randy O'Neill to say, oops, sorry, to say what kind of smart boards we wanted to coordinate with the schools so the kids don't have a learning curve that our smart boards would be different from yours. So we have the same thing in the library. We now have 3 of them, 1 in the children's department and 2 up on the 2nd floor for meeting times and things like that so the kids can get familiar with that. So we've got some new technology and things in the library, and we think that creates a good atmosphere for partnership with the schools. There are some public libraries that used to be like networked in with the schools so the kids could log into their homework. That's no longer needed because if it's web-based, they can do that anywhere. But we do have computers that are dedicated for children's department and kids 12 to 18 so that they're able to get access when they're away from school and in the library. So what I'm really interested in this evening is tell you a little bit about our structure. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're also a state-aided library, which means Commonwealth Libraries is our agency, and it's under Department of Ed. So we're under Department of Ed, just like you. And we're kind of the stepchild, but we're under the Department of Ed. And we have a lot of similarities. We do E-rate, you do E-rate. We do a lot of the same kind of requirements. We have requirements as well under that system. But because of that, we'd like to partner with the library or with the schools. And right now, we have some openings on our library board. Under the library laws, schools are considered a municipality. So our local support comes from municipalities. It comes from Indiana Borough and White Township. Indiana Borough and White Township both appoint people to our library leadership. And the schools have not done that, even though we've been funded by Indiana school districts since the 70s, a long time. So we are interested because at this time we're hoping to launch into some strategic planning and looking at the future and goals, and we'd like to coordinate with your goals and support those goals. So we think the library is a resource for you as well, and I think that that would open up a whole lot of channels for great possibilities for good activities for our families. So that's what I'm interested in.
Okay, thank you. I don't know who gets it either.
Thank you.
Are you ready to go back on script?
No. We have 2 more presentations.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep screwing up the script if you're okay with that.
No,
sir.
I'm furious, but we'll have to live with it.
Next on the call, we have Daryl Williams from the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. Recently at the high school, there's been a couple issues that we had to navigate some waters, uncharted waters through. We want to have a conversation here tonight with you about gaining the support of the committee to enter into an equity audit. That would be at no cost to district. That would be led by the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. And it transcends, it goes beyond just race. It looks at a lot of different operations that we do in the district and a lot of different lenses they're going to look at. But before we ask you to buy into it and accept it, we want to introduce Daryl. He's on the call today. He's a former superintendent out of Maryland who now works at the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. And he's going to talk to the committee a little bit about the process looks like, the why behind it, some of the different parameters we're going to look at. As you know, this board has really charged this administration with making sure equity is at the heart of the work we're doing. And not only in the area of race, but the area of operations, the area of planning, area of resources, et cetera, et cetera. And based on some recent events, we think it's time that we bring in an outside group to help us through this and identify what our strengths and weaknesses are. And like anything else, we can improve. So with your permission, Mr. Harley, I'd like to turn the floor over to him.
Okay.
Daryl, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. And thank you all for having me in your meeting. I also want to introduce my colleague, Michelle Nutter, who is part of our work at the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, known as MAEC. And so I'm just going to take a few minutes to just kind of give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do and why we feel this equity audit is going to be of value for you and your district. So the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, MAEC.org, is one of 4 regional technical assistance centers. We are a company that is about 30 years in providing resources, technical assistance, training, et cetera, to school districts and state departments of education in 15 states, actually 13 states and 2 territories. We are funded by the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, and we are engaged in the work around equity and social justice in education. We work, again, in school districts and states from Kentucky, going up the East Coast all the way up to Maine, and also the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And so, you know, we take this approach that we focus our work around the core issues of race, gender, national origin and religion as a part of the civil rights. Yeah. So also we are working with multiple districts, but we're working with your district in particular, or at least proposing to work with your district to explore equity in a very broad sense. So one of the things that's important is that we get a clear sense of your strategic focus, the things that you find are important in building that capacity of teachers, but also in focusing on student achievement and in providing an equitable environment in your district for all students to have access to the resources and to teaching and learning opportunities where they can be successful. The equity audit itself is a tool that we use to do a very deep examination of policies, practices, and within a district. We engage in a number of areas where we explore how the district manages itself, basically. There are areas in which we look for, we look to see that there is equity in practice. We look for equity, again, in policy. We look for equity in student achievement, equity in building a strong community, education community that not just includes your schools, but your overall district and how it relates to your community. The areas that we focus on in our audit are around school policy, assessing the needs of the community, looking at your school district organizational structure and the administration, school climate and the school environment, staffing issues, hiring practices, assessments and placements, professional learning, and standards and curriculum development. We focus some of our equity examinations at the classroom level, where we explore and examine academic placement and tracking and grouping, student leadership and recognition, classroom environments and instructional strategies. And we also use our audit to explore issues around teacher behavior. So teacher practice around instructional strategies, curriculum design, classroom management, interpersonal practice, and teacher behavior that encourages student persistence. All of these areas within the scope of our audit really helps us to take that real deep look at what are the practices, those practices that are probably historic in nature, those practices that are new ideas that the district wants to explore, but all of the ideas and strategies that support a strategic vision and mission for your school district. We don't want this equity audit that we propose to be something that is burdensome. We also don't want it to be something that you find doesn't relate to the direction that you're trying to move into. And so we would intentionally work with your district, your administrators, your teachers, families, parents, students, to ensure that we capture the voices of your community so that we can hear what are the emerging and salient issues that impact teaching and learning in your district, and to, again, see if there are other issues that may not have risen to the surface of your attention, but that we can co-construct and examine together in ways to create strategies that will improve teaching and learning in your district. That's sort of the work that we do, sort of a very broad overview of what we do. For the most of the work that we do is of no cost to a school district, because again, we are funded by the U.S. Department of Education's grant. There may be costs associated beyond the scope of our work, and we could get into that at another time, but those costs would be very minimal. and I shared that with the superintendent. But overall, we look at the capacity of our organization to be able to see how we can best support you in your efforts to examine the full scope of the work of education. We engage in a long-term commitment. Long-term could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 years, but 3 to 5 years would be our commitment to you in working with you. So we not only uncover or identify areas where we may, the data may point us in directions for inequities that may exist, but we also help you build strategies. We provide recommendations for change. We look at training opportunities. We look at resource management, and I shared some of those bullet points with you earlier, that we would walk with you throughout the course of our partnership together. And again, it is a partnership with the Mid-Atlantic Center and the school district. So that's kind of what we do, how we do it. We've got a very strong staff, a very capable staff with multiple years of experiences in K-12 education, in policy development, in research and evaluation, in community and family building. We utilize the work of consultants as well. We have consultants from West Ed, which is one of the national research arms, as well as the American Institute of Research is a partner of ours. And so we collaboratively work with the districts to again, build your capacity to mitigate any issues around injustices and inequities in your school district. So I'm going to stop right there. I don't know if my colleague Michelle would like to add anything.
Well, Daryl, I'm here representing the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, so I don't know if I'm another bullet point to take us off script or not, or if you want me to go ahead and talk now.
Well, let's say we are collaborative partners. And so Michelle works in collaboration with us to support all the work that we're doing throughout Pennsylvania. And she'll give you some details, when you need that information. I'll just put it that way. Okay. I think there was a hand raised from someone who.
Yes, sir. One of our board members, Ms. Blank.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Blank.
Hi. From while you were speaking, I was doing double duty, listening and looking up your lovely company business on the internet. And I have to say that I look forward to working with you for the next 3 to 5 years. So, my 2 cents. That's all.
Thank you. Again, we've been in this business well over 30 years, almost 35 years as an equity assistance center, and I think that longevity and our relationship with districts and states, and as well as the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, has allowed us to be able to work in partnership with districts and really be a real resource to you.
And Daryl, if I can add, Mr. Harley and committee members, this is not about politics. This is not about indoctrination or anything else that you may think of or may have heard of. What this is about is our system reflective to the needs of our students? Are we developing something that meets the needs of the kids and meets them where they're at? Michelle Nutter is a close friend professionally with us who came to the district several times to help train staff on different types of issues and topics related to implicit bias, to sensitivity training, and how we can really prepare staff to meet the needs of all of our students. We don't pick and choose which kids we're going to serve. We love them all. We accept them all when they walk through the doors. That's the one, I think, the most important things and strongest things about public education. Where we know need help on the continuous conversation, need help with continuing to move forward about how do we really continuously improve the district to give the kids what they need when they need it. And this is really what it's about. It's about giving kids the support and the administration the support they need to be able to go out there and meet the moment for our kids, because their kids are counting on us. And there's a lot of great kids here, but there's also a lot of kids who need help, and our system needs to be reflective our system needs to be evolving. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to increase awareness, increase capacity. So when we go do the work is meaningful, it's manageable, and it's impactful. And that's really what we're trying to do. Darryl, would you agree with that, or did I?
That is absolutely correct. And I just want to emphasize the fact that we, as an organization, we don't come to you with a predetermined script or a way of looking at the organizational structure. We rely on you to tell us what the needs are, and we tailor our work based on the needs in your district. We also don't promote controversial issues, but we do think it's important that we examine your entire district through that lens of equity, so that we understand where the gaps are in terms of teaching and learning, in achievement, in organization and policy, so that we can help you reduce those gaps and provide a systemic structure that benefits every student in your district, regardless of whatever race, gender characteristic that they are identified by. So I just want to be clear that, with this climate, the political climate, and other types of controversial topics that are out there, that's not what we do. But we do a deep examination based on how we decide we're going to look at you. And when I say we, I mean the district and the Mid-Atlantic Center, how we construct together what the needs are, how we are going to identify strategies and approaches, and then help you decide what's priority in terms of how you're going to address those issues.
Mr. Harley, committee, what we're saying is, look, if our principles have to be followed by practice, this is one tool that can help us to continue to evolve, to continue to grow, to go out there and provide kids with the supportive, conducive learning environment that all kids deserve. And that's what we're working towards. We want to be upfront on our intentions, because we don't want any misinformation or distortion of the reality coming from this meeting. It's about us getting better at looking at a systematic view about what we can do to improve learning opportunities for all kids. And that's really where at the heart of it. Darryl, if it's okay with you, I would like to turn over to Michelle for a brief minute. Oh, yes, sir.
I have one question for Darryl. This is Walter Schroth, Darryl. You said you're the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. There is a Mid-Atlantic group that does our accreditation. Are you associated with that group at all?
No, we do not do school accreditation. I don't know if that's the Middle States Association or some other association, but no, that's not us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Harley, committee members, Michelle Nutter is, again, when we needed help about how do we talk about school climate, what can we do to improve school climate, she was one of the first ones to answer a call. We call her quite often for some help and some professional development, but she is a critical friend. So Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add? I know you're working with us on trying to set up some other visits to other schools to see the SPIRIT program and implementation, but is there anything else you would like to add to the conversation so I don't omit you?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm here on behalf of Attorney General Josh Shapiro, representing the Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office. I am the Education and Outreach Program Manager and the office's Civil Rights Outreach Specialist. I have been assisting your district with teacher in service for a number of years and continue to do that. I'm scheduled to provide some training for the district in April. And in addition, our office offers other free supports around student assemblies and student dialogues. And we are in conversation about the SPIRIT program, which was just mentioned. This is a program that comes out of the U.S. Department of Justice's Community Relations Service. And it's a student leadership dialogue where we ask the students, what's going great? And then we ask them, what could use some work? We think it's very important to have that student voice to help us identify areas where we may need some improvement, where there may be inequities. I have worked very closely with the Mid-Atlantic Center for the past 11 years, and I love the fact that they come into this work with the intention of working with you, not telling you what to do, really focused on co-constructing what your plan looks like. And it's not based on cookie cutter template anything. It's based on your data. What if you do focus groups, if you do climate surveys, what that data tells us about what's going on in the school. And so then we can look at that data together and develop a co-constructed plan to increase that equity within your district. I think that I'll just end with this statement. Students who don't feel safe have a hard time learning. Students who don't feel connected have a hard time learning. Students who don't feel like they belong have a hard time learning, right? So if our job is to teach our students and make sure that they learn, then we have to attend to climate. We have to create an atmosphere where kids can feel safe, they can feel accepted, they can feel valued, and they can feel like they belong. And that's what we from the Attorney General's office, and I know I speak for Daryl as well, from the folks at the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, that's what we want to help you do. Create that safe climate where every student can feel safe, where every student belongs, and that leads to academic achievement.
Mr. Harley and committee members, what we're really looking at is two fronts. One, for the administrators and teachers to go through and continue our own professional growth and look at our systems perspective. But the second thing, which Michelle alluded to, which I think is even more powerful, empowering, encouraging student voice, that we can have students talk about sensitive issues, topics of like race, topics about equity. I'm still shocked how many people confuse equity and equality, and they're two separate things, right? It's about how we get stronger, how we get better as a community. And I really like the idea about empowering students to have a voice, to be able to talk to them, to be able to dissent with dignity, to be able to be diplomatic. I think if anything in the world is needed right now, it's those things, right? And those are the things we're trying to work on. And we're trying to work on it together with critical friends, because we recognize that we can't do it alone. And these are some great resources that we'd like the committee to consider and allowing us to move forward. And at this time, Mr. Harley, I'll turn the floor over to any of the committee members, board members who may have questions for myself, my administration, Michelle, and Daryl. And I'm allowed to call Daryl. He's Dr. Williams, but he yelled at me, told me to call Daryl. Michelle says I can call Michelle. So I'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Harley, and see if there's any comments.
Committee members, do you have any questions? Are we good? I don't see any hands raised. Is there a hand going up?
Mr. Kerr, go ahead, Mr. Kerr.
Yeah, I'm not a committee member, Tom, but.
Yeah, you work.
Anytime we go down a new path, we always ask the question, are there other local school districts that have used this recently or regionally, another school district that the administration could reach out to and, ask the question, sort of do an after action review, or hopefully they have. Maybe there's a way to better communicate this through the parents, the students, the community. Maybe if they had to do it again, they would maybe implement it in a different sequence or something like that. Is there, any benefit to that? And are there any districts that we would be familiar with?
No, that's a great question, Mr. Kerr. We did anticipate something like that of our own thinking. So we asked Michelle to set up a visit for us to go visit a school and see what these type of programs look like in implementation. Because I'm not a fan, I'll be open and honest with this committee, I'm not a fan about putting 500 people in a room and say, hey, let's talk about race. Let's talk about equity. I think you need to have some prep, some background on how to structure that conversation, and be able to have a difficult conversation like that. So we were going to go to Erie last week. That fell through for a one-day visit. But I know Michelle's working with us on a visit to Center County. We're going to send the high school administration there to see a Spirit program in implementation. So that's one thing. Second thing, I'll in response to your comments, Mr. Kerr, when you look at the Department of Education, both at the local level, the state level, as well as the federal level, that's been one type of area of focus for both entities about the topic of equity and what that looks like. So we also work with PSBA to look at some of our policies, because remember, this transcends beyond just race. It looks at staffing, it looks at resources. There's a lot of different ways we do that. But long story short, Mr. Kerr, yes, we are going to visit a school. And Michelle, I don't want to put you in a spot. I know you emailed us today saying you're going to try to set something up. Can you elaborate so I don't misspeak to the board and committee?
Well, I'd rather not say which district
Fair enough.
until I have their okay to do so. But yes, we are going to make that happen, and I don't foresee a problem. As the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, we have worked with districts throughout Pennsylvania, and I'm sure that Daryl would be able to reach out to those districts first to make sure they're okay with us turning contact information over to you. But again, I wouldn't foresee a problem with any of the districts we've worked with wanting to talk to you. I also will say that both the Pennsylvania Department of Education as well as the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, very strongly support the work that MAEC does in Pennsylvania, in addition to individual districts. So we can, I'm speaking for you, Daryl, I'm sorry.
No problem. Great.
We can certainly get that information.
You can get that information to Mike again, rather than just calling out names of districts at this point. And I think we could also look and see some districts that Mike may know, the superintendents there, and just, create that connecting point with those superintendents so that they can have some dialogue too.
And Daryl, I think it's worth noting, remember, Mr. President and Madam Vice President, on our comp plan committee, when the pandemic hit, we kind of shut down our meetings, but we were going there pretty strong for a couple months. Mid-Atlantic was part of that group as well. So they came in and worked with our teachers who are on the committee and our parents on that committee. So they are not new to the district. And this is a partnership that's been in place for about a year or two. It's just a different now aspect maybe of the partnership that we're looking at doing. Because, in my opinion, Mr. President and Mr. Harley and committee members, if we don't look at this from a systems perspective, then I don't know where to start, or we're putting committee fronts. So I think having a systematic front and examination of policies and procedures will do us well. If you agree with that, Daryl.
Yes, sir. I definitely do.
I don't hear any objection, Mike, to pushing this forward. Do you want to make this as a motion on the board level?
I don't know if we need a motion, but I can do that.
It'd give us a chance to solidify it.
Yep,
and talk about it a little bit more in that further reading. But
And last thing is, please know this, I am working, we have Representative Struzzi and others are also talking about how we can all work together on this topic. So it's starting to morph a little bit bigger than the school, but for right now, we're talking about the school, but I can definitely do that.
Okay,
Daryl or Michelle, any final comments from you?
No, thank you all for having us. And we look forward to the next steps in this process and working with you, continuing to work with you, because again, we've been working with you for over a year.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Next on the list, Mr. Harley, if it's okay with the committee and you. Yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt. Anybody want the last call at the coffee bar?
Oh, that's worthy of a break. If you want it, please do. Trust me.
If you do, otherwise, we thank our students, teachers, and staff for.
Thank you so much. All right, next on the list, we have Miss Tracy Pecor. She's here to present cardiovascular diagnostic testing. Here's what I know, but she'll go in much greater detail because this is not my world. But there is no charge to the district. Information would be sent out to families prior. It'd be conducted over summer. And parent consent would be required before any type of diagnostic testing would occur. This is absolutely voluntary. This is something about Tracy getting together that makes this service available to our families. We thought we'd bring it forward for some input from the committee with understanding of, again, permission from parents is required. It's optional. It's not mandated. And there are no costs to the district. With that said, Nurse Pecor, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Is Laura showing up on the meeting?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Lori. Oh, I'm
Hi
sorry.
there. Hi, everyone.
I didn't mean to omit you. I apologize for ignoring you. I didn't know you were there. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. No problem.
Laurie works for Capo Health. They are the company that would perform these diagnostic tests. They generally speaking work with athletes. She's the executive director that works with the athletic testing. But we were interested in opening it to all students 12 and up, anyone that would be interested. The high school would do the physicals for the athletes, and then these tests would be performed. I want her here to answer detailed questions if you have any, but all the testing are non-invasive. There's no preparation. Certainly, we would have parent consent and give them any information they would be interested in. The importance of this is there's one athlete that dies every 3 days from sudden cardiac death. And these are students and athletes that pass their physicals, and doctors are signing off that they're cleared. But these are abnormalities that nobody knows about that you can't find under a normal physical. Is that correct, Laura?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you so much for that. And, you know, when you think of kids, you don't normally think of cardiac arrest, right? It's not something that you normally think about. But Tracy is absolutely correct that according to the American Heart Association, we call them athletes. That doesn't mean that kids that only participate in a formal athletic sport, but any kids performing an athletic activity, including bike riding, running, playing tag football, kids between the ages of 12 to 25, and those are some of my college kids, are considered to be at a high risk for sudden cardiac arrest. And again, it's not something that we normally think about, but we are losing a child every 3 days. And I'm just going to read a couple of statistics to you guys. So again, as Tracy said, in 80% of these cases, there are no warning signs or symptoms that lead up to a cardiac arrest. These kids are going through their physicals, and some of these things are not able to be detected during just a regular physical. Here's a couple of facts for you guys. Young athletes are more than twice as likely to experience a sudden cardiac arrest than a non-athlete. And in the United States, we just discussed a young competitive athlete dies every 3 days. I believe that now the American Heart Association has even bumped that up to 2.5 days. Most victims are male. 90% of these victims are male. So we're talking about football players, a lot of basketball players, although we have our girl basketball teams, which we're very proud of. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, HCM, is the leading cause of cardiovascular death in young athletes. 36% of our young athletes, if they do have a cardiac episode, are diagnosed with HCM. It's a disease that causes the thickening of the heart muscle. More than half of the HCM sudden death victims are Black athletes, 52%. The average age when a sudden cardiac death occurs in a young athlete is between 16 and 18 years old. More than 2/3 of young athletes who die suddenly are basketball and football players. So that's 67% of the kids who are passing away from cardiac arrest are basketball and football players. 33% of these patients, after having some kind of unknown cardiac episode, are even more at risk to have a cardiac death. So our program provides no-cost cardiovascular testing. We come out to the schools. We do 3 different kinds of tests. As Tracy had mentioned, they're all non-invasive. Our tests include an EKG. We do a full echocardiogram and a full vascular ultrasound. It's a completely comprehensive set of cardiovascular tests. The way that we're able to offer the program at no cost is that we work directly with the student's insurance. For every family, we provide a waiver of financial responsibility, and that helps to be able to eliminate any copay for the family. And we also don't do any balance billing. So what does that mean? So that, in a nutshell, means that no family or the school or the district or the student, of course, is ever going to have to reach into their pocket for a single penny to pay for our testing. If you have kids that are uninsured or underinsured, we're happy to test them anyway. We don't want to leave any kids out. That would be horrible, just to only test kids based on the status of their insurance. So we're happy to test all kids. Going back to the waiver that we just talked about, So just about every family can qualify for the waiver of financial responsibility. Some of the items that can qualify a family would be if you have any outstanding medical bills, do you have any credit card debt? Do you have, are you at a certain income level with a certain number of children that will qualify you? Are you saving for college? There are a list of about 15 things on the waiver. We have never had a family that did not qualify. And it doesn't matter if the remaining balance is $500 or $5, that family is still eligible to sign the waiver and send it back, and we eliminate any outstanding bill for that family. No family will ever get a bill for our testing, ever. Okay. The way that we work with the schools is we come out, our technicians work directly for us. We don't pick them from each city that we go to. So they're specifically trained to work with athletes. They know exactly what to look for, but they also are able to detect things like genetic birth defects, Wolff Parkinson's White, HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, myocarditis. We also check for blood clots. We check for those life-threatening abnormalities that can result in a cardiac episode. So when the technicians come out, they set everything up. Everything arrives in a box. There's nothing to purchase. We provide everything that you need for testing. And they come out, they set it all up, they do the testing. When everything's finished, they break everything down. It gets boxed back up and shipped back out. So we really try to make it very easy for the school. We certainly appreciate when a school offers cardiac testing to their athletes or student body in general. So we really do try to do all of the back end work. We really don't. Not only do we not want you guys to participate in the work part, but we really don't need you to. We really have it all covered. The only participation that we do require when we talk about kids being under the age of 17, because they are still living at home, they are still under their parents' guidance. So we do require kids under the age of 17 to have parent permission. We will not test any student under the age of 17 without parent permission. So in order to do that, the parent just goes online. They just fill out the parent paperwork. It's very simple. It takes all of about 5 minutes. It's just some yes and no questions. They can fill out the waiver at the same time and send it back to us, and they're done. The way that we have them schedule their kids is in the form of a link. We get that link out to you guys. I would probably send it to Tracy or the athletic director at the school. That can get put on your school website. It can get sent out to parents' cell phones, email. It's very easy. So however you guys normally communicate with your parents, it's a very easy method to get a link to them. They just click on the link and they put in their student name. So first name, last name, cell phone, and that's it. And the way that they do that is they just choose an appointment time that works best for their child's schedule. Maybe they want to pick their child up after school that day and have them do after school testing. Perfectly fine. If they want their child to do midday testing, we do not dictate that. We leave it up to the parent to choose. In terms of what happens after testing, once a student gets tested, they are normally considered good to go. They're heart healthy for the entire time that they are with you, usually until they go into college. Even at the junior high level, if they are tested at the junior high level and they go to high school, they are able to take those cardiovascular records because it becomes a part of their permanent medical record. They can take that and it will transfer with their school records. So if you do have athletes at the junior high level and they need to go for cardiac testing at the high school level and they want to play football or they want to play basketball, now they have a heart healthy test right in their hand, and that parent doesn't have to worry about taking their child for further cardiac testing. It saves the parent money in co-pays, any additional billing, and that parent also has the peace of mind of knowing that their student is heart healthy before they go and hit the field. So in terms of what happens after we do the testing, we get the medical records back to the school within 24 hours. We have a 24-hour turnaround time. So if your kids test on Monday, you're going to have those records back by Tuesday. We have on our staff we have a couple of cardiovascular, board certified cardiovascular doctors. We have a cardiac pediatric cardiologist. Is that me echoing, by the way, guys? I apologize if it is.
No, you're fine.
Okay. So we have a pediatric cardiologist. We also have board certified cardiologists. We do have some nurses, our technicians that all work with us as well. We come in, we provide you with the testing and the results. Any follow-up care that may be needed is still going to need to be done by that student's primary caregiver. We do not do any follow-up, but what we do provide is any information that may let someone know that their child may need to be seen by a cardiologist or a physician. The reason that we do this testing is, like I said, a lot of these cardiac abnormalities go undetected. And this is how we are losing these kids. This is preventable. It does not have to happen. It is a very easy test. It takes about an hour per student. We can send you multiple technicians to do multiple kids at the same time. And there's no cost to the school or the student or the family for the testing. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you. Does anyone have any questions for me? Yes. Terrence.
Yes, thank you, Lori. How can we, I guess, confirm with that the information, the patient's information, I'll call them patients,
Yes.
information is safe and it's not going to be sold or anything like that?
Sure, that's a very good question. So we never sell or provide any of our patient information. Everything goes through a double encrypted software system. So when we transfer information from our cardiologist into the software system, only one person at your school, it's most likely going to be Tracy or the athletic trainer. We only provide access to one person at your school. We are completely HIPAA compliant. So only one person will be allowed to log in. What you choose to do with those records after you receive them is up to you, but we will not release medical records to more than one person. And our system is a double encrypted system.
So
Go ahead, Walter.
So, Lori, this is Walter Schroth. I have two questions. One is a follow-up on what Terry said. And that is from the school district's perspective, does the school district see some of this information, particularly if the student has a diagnosed with an issue that might cause that problem of the heart attack, because there could be a possibility of a liability then from the school district if we allow that person then to play that football or that basketball or whatever, knowing that they've got that that issue to start with.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to do your second question? Is it related, or would you like me to answer one at a time?
No, it's not related. Well,
Okay.
it is, but it's very distant. But
Okay. Okay. So, that's kind of a double-edged sword in my world. Our goal is to help prevent cardiac arrest in these athletes. And we don't know if an athlete has an abnormality normally until it's too late. And I can share that with you. As a parent who lost a child, I lost my son when he was 17. Not to something related to this, but something that was also preventable. And if someone would have said to me, do you want to try this and take a test? you know, if someone would have given me the information about what it is, what it can find, what it can prevent, I would have, of course, done it if someone said it could save my child's life. Even if they said he may not be able to play football or golf, because my son was also an athlete. If an athlete has an abnormality that is detected, that's your best and worst case scenario, right? Because if you do detect an abnormality, now you're able to get that athlete or that child in general medical help before something catastrophic happens. The whole point of the program is for it to be preventative before something tragic happens. So that athlete may need to go to see a cardiologist. It doesn't necessarily mean they won't ever be able to play sports again. It just may mean that they may need to go see a doctor to take care of something going on with their heart, fix that issue, and then get them back out on the field. So in terms of a liability, it almost releases the school from the liability because you're providing that cardiovascular testing. So you are doing everything you can to provide every level of safety for your students. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
No, I understand what your explanation, and I'm sorry to hear about your son. My concern is that we have some of our, better athletes that are really driven by their sport. They really, it's their whole life.
Sure.
And they may push back from the parents and say, I'm still going to go out for football. I'm still going to, and so what is the role of the school, the role of the school in this case with that kind of medical information?
Sure. Well, if a student goes for cardiac testing, in order for them to do that, they have to have parent permission. So at that point, it really becomes the parent's decision. If the parent gives permission for that child to go through cardiac testing and an abnormality is detected, and the parent is the one who is giving the student and the school permission to have that student play, and you are aware that that student is playing with an abnormality, I certainly can't tell you what to do in that case. I can give you some suggestions, but it would certainly be a big conversation that I would have. There may also be some paperwork involved at that point, because if that parent is aware that their child has something that can be life-threatening if they play ball and they're still willing to do that, I think that's a whole separate issue.
I understand, but does the school district get that information that there was that abnormality from the cardiac pediatrician, that they found the murmur, or they found whatever it was? Is that information shared with us?
Right. So I'm sorry. So yes, yes and no. The information is only shared with one person. So that would be our point person at your school. Again, it would be maybe Tracy. So whatever process that you set up at your school for any abnormality that is detected, then in that case, if you wish to be notified, I'm sure that you could set up that type of a protocol.
Okay. That answers that question.
But I am not allowed to do that because that is a violation of HIPAA.
And I understand that part of it, but I just want to know whether there is some way for the school to get that information.
Sure.
And the follow-up question is, you said the majority of the students were football and basketball players, which are relatively strenuous sports. You also, I believe, said that it's because of a thinning in the heart wall that causes this a lot of times. Do we understand why this happens and understand why it's in those two sports?
Sure. Well,
versus wrestling or some of the running events in track, which can be equally as physically strenuous as football or basketball.
Yes. And that's a very good point. I think that if we had the answer to that magic question, it would be even easier to know exactly which kids to test. But I will tell you, so HCM, it's actually a thickening of the wall, not a thinning. So, and I think that the reason that an athlete can have a thickening of the wall is because the muscle is a heart. The heart is a muscle. So the more that you work it, the more likely you are to have an enlarged muscle, right? Just like arm muscles or leg muscles or ab muscles. So your heart grows the more you use it, the same as any other muscle. In some cases, that muscle becomes over enlarged or over inflamed. It doesn't necessarily mean that athlete is overexerting themselves. It is just the genetic makeup of that individual where their heart is now inflamed, almost like a pulled muscle in your arm. And you can't actually detect which kids are going to have this condition, HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's something that really can only be detected in an ultrasound, which is an echo of the heart. That's where you pick the inflammation up. It's a real good 3D picture of the heart. But to go back to things that are, not the norm, just in the state of Pennsylvania, I can share with you that last year, and I don't know if you're aware of this, I work with a few schools in Pennsylvania, colleges, and I'm pointing this out for a reason. Over Labor Day weekend last year, there was a young girl, her name was Brooke, and she was a track and field star at a college in Pennsylvania, 18 years old, I believe, and she passed away. She collapsed during a track meet and unfortunately passed away on her way to the hospital. So she was female and also not a football or basketball player. So there are other cases. It just happens to be that those kids are targeted physically for some reason. But I am not a doctor, so I cannot even begin to diagnose why those kids are more targeted, but I can tell you they are, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're the only ones.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
As a former high school coach, I had to take a seminar on sudden heart troubles. And all it did was terrify me because of my lack of qualifications. This would certainly give our coaches a chance to identify these kids and get them help. And we'll need to set up protocols inside the school on how to handle this information. But the last person that you should have worrying about heart attacks is the softball coach. So it would just not qualify. And we had to take the heart certification and the concussion certification.
Mm-hmm.
And I may know a lot about softball, but I don't know anything about these other two problems. And they put the seminars put the burden on the coach, and I think it's very unfair. This gives us a chance to eliminate one of those or certainly reduce the chance. So I would certainly support this moving forward.
Thank you,
the
Coach.
committee, anything from the committee?
No.
Go.
So two things. You answered one of them kind of. I was going to ask you specifically what the tests were.
Mm-hmm.
That echocardiogram for one, and probably an EKG for another. I didn't know if there was any blood testing or anything more invasive, because you said you have turnaround of 24 hours.
Yes. So our testing is completely non-invasive. There are no needles, no blood tests whatsoever. The third test is a vascular ultrasound, and we do from ankles to carotid, and we check for blood clots and PEs, which athletes are prone to. And I see Coach had gotten up, but I also wanted to also add first of all, and I thank him for what he just shared about the training that is provided, and I'm sure your school nurse, Tracy, as well. And I don't know how many other of you guys have ever gone through cardiac training or CPR training. You may even have defibrillators around your school, which we pray that you do. Our goal or our hope is that you never need to use them, right? Because the training that people get is great, but in real life situation, there are so many things that have to line up in order for that entire process to come out with a very good outcome. And it doesn't always happen. We're relying on ordinary people to perform these extraordinary tasks. And not that it's unfair, because that's our job, it's our role, but it's a lot, and our hope is that you never have to do that. That's why we want to come in. We feel that prevention is better than ever having to use a defibrillator.
Mr. Kerr, we noticed your hand's up. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. And Lori, I apologize if you've already said this. If we would sign up for this program, do we have to test every student? And if we don't, I guess the next follow-up is, does the school district determine which students are tested?
The answer to both those questions is no. Because you are a public school, you do not have to make testing mandatory. You can, but in most of my public schools, no, they do not. It is an optional program that is offered to mostly athletics, but you can, of course, open it up to the entire school. And it's normally the parents who decide if they would like to have their child tested. And also, if you have kids that are listed in your school system that may have family history of heart disease or any kind of a congenital heart problem in their family, or if they've ever had anyone who has had, a cardiac episode, those are the kids that you want to have tested, or that you should suggest to have tested. Testing is not mandatory. I will say, though, one of the requests that we have as a program, because we are not a nonprofit, we do request that when we come out to the school, that you have at least a group of 20 to 25 kids for us to put on a testing event. It's quite an ordeal for us. We book technicians, we have the doctors, all of the supplies, flights, hotels, etc. We have a lot of moving parts on our end. So in order for us to come out and do a day of testing, we really need to see a big group of kids. We can't just come out for 2 or 3 or 4 kids. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Thank
And
you.
Mr. Harley, the committee would not recommend that we make this mandatory. We're just
Oh, no.
making it available to families. We don't want to go down that road and cause, any type of angst or people overthinking that we're overstepping our lines. This would be something that if families wanted it,
Strictly voluntary.
strictly volunteer, it's there for them.
Yeah, but also available in the elementary, as I understand it. So once you get tested, this test clears you for all through college, basically. So
We do recommend that when the kids get to the college age, the college level, we retest them again.
Okay, that'll be between you and the kids. We're worried about the first year.
Yes.
So it's
So if we have a testing event, say in May or June, and have, the vast majority of the football players and basketball players, so forth, what if a student moves to the area in August? He's new. Is there a place that they could go to take part in this testing? Maybe we wouldn't have enough students for another event here, but would they be able to go and participate in this free testing?
So number one, it's not free. I always like to point that out. We do work with the athlete's insurance, but I can't answer that question because I have no idea what schools in your area that we may be testing at in August. Yes, of course, if we are nearby and that student would like to participate, we're happy to do so. If you are testing in August, you may want to consider making sure that all of your incoming kids know about this testing. So you may want to put this out to all of your kids, year after year or season after season, because normally what happens when we work with, I call them the little ones because I work with the big kids too, the college level kids. So when I work with the little ones, we don't get as much participation as you may think or that we hope for. I try to really educate parents, and I have a lot of information that I can share with your district and with Tracy and the schools. But we have flyers to send home to parents. I can give them one-on-one education if they want. They're happy. I can make myself available for people to call me, but you would be surprised, even people knowing how important this is. And I know, we did just discuss this, that people don't always want to participate in the testing. Like the coach had just mentioned, or Walter, I believe you may have just asked this question. What if, a parent either knows about something, or maybe they say, I don't want my child tested because I don't want to know what's wrong. We do get that. And it's very frustrating from where I sit, but we do hope that you offer this. You can offer it once a month. As far as I'm concerned, you can offer it once a season, or open it up to winter sports, open it up to fall sports, spring sports, summer. We can come again as many times as you need us, as long as you have groups, and we're happy to do so. So we hope that if you do have a new athlete, but you've only got one, unfortunately, we can't accommodate one, but we hope that you will continue to have groups. Does that make sense?
Yes, and then that brings me to another question.
Sure.
If this is going to be covered by family insurance plans, what kind of success have you had with most insurance covering this? Because it's a preventative type test, are they more willing to cover it, or will we have a lot of students who potentially don't have it covered because of their insurance?
So we accept all insurance, including Medicaid. We don't get paid by Medicaid, but again, we test those kids anyway, regardless. So at the end of the day, whether we get paid for our services by the carrier or not, it doesn't matter to you guys, because we're still not going to bill you or the family. They're still not going to get a bill, whether they cover the preventative testing or not. In the past couple of years, I will tell you that we have been received a lot better by most of the carriers. Preventative testing is actually appreciated and encouraged these days by a lot of the insurance carriers, because they know in the long run it saves them a great deal of money if, God forbid, one of their covered has a catastrophe. Then it costs them a fortune. Prevention is always the key.
Mike, I think we can move this ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering, you said that the records are sent to the school and they're available to the parents, correct? The school will make them available to the parents?
If they choose to, yes.
I'm sorry, you also said that they become part of the student's permanent medical record. Is it just the cardiologist interpretation, or actually the images of the ultrasounds also part of that record?
That's a great question. We provide you not just the data, but you also get the images. So you're going to get those pictures, the EKG, the echo, and the ultrasound, all of it. Yes, but thank you for asking that.
I think we can endorse this and move it on to the board. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank
you to everyone. Thank you very much.
So now we'll start with number 1 on the agenda.
Why start there?
Yeah, 2 hours later.
And I'll go through these relatively quickly, be sensitive of everyone's time. Mr. Harley, committee, what we're asking for is authorization use of extra ESSER funds that we received that were dedicated solely for the purpose of after-school tutoring. We received about $39,000 in the district. We would like to do 2 things with that money. One, partner with the YMCA to send 2 of our staff members over to their facilities from March 21st through April 25th, twice a week, 90 minutes each session. for 6 weeks to provide some direct instruction and tutoring and intervention in the area of literacy. YMCA would coordinate and host and manage the program, take care of transportations, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second thing we wanted to do is when we looked at some of our PSSA preliminary data, we held the line or did pretty well despite the pandemic in the area of literacy. Where we continue to see struggles is the area of mathematics. So what we'd like to do for grades 4 through 8 is host a math acceleration / intervention / tutoring program at the junior high for grades 4 through 8. That would also be twice a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays, 90 minutes each session for 6 weeks, March 21st through April 25th. There we could serve about 150 kids. Spring math would be the main intervention tool used by our staff. Mr. Heinrich contacted the company and worked with them about what that would look like, what that would consist of, not only from a practical standpoint, but from a cost standpoint as well. We can cover everything within the confines of the grant, which I gave the committee members a copy of the proposed budget. We're actually under budget by about $1,500 that we can work with. We would need permission to post for these positions, and this is where it gets a little convoluted. Our meeting's March 14th and March 28th. This program is set to start on March 21st. So what we need to talk at Ms. Cinda's committee meeting, get permission, talk to this committee, her committee, as well as the 14th, get permission to post positions, trust us to hire, then we'll retroactively hire the people at the 28th. But we want to get 6 weeks of supports in prior to PSSA testing window coming down the road. You can come back and say, Mike, no, let's wait till next year. We just find difficulty in the value of waiting till next year. If we're trying to really close that gap and get it right done before testing, this seems like a unique opportunity. It also gives us another opportunity to find out and test the spring math as an intervention program here in the district. I provided the committee with the budget. I provided the committee with an outline of what the schedule would look like. We have to still work through some of the details in full transparency. I think we built this over, a day. Our principals and us met. We talked about it. We have anticipated vacancies out to staff already to see if we can try to garner some interest for staff applying. The time is of the essence, and I apologize for the lateness of this, but once we were made aware of the grant opportunity, we wanted to make the most advantage of it. You have every right to say, Mike, send the money back. We could do that as well, but we thought timing wise, this is the right thing to do at the right time, and we think the math is going to be a bigger area of concern as we continue to see struggles across the country and across the Commonwealth in that area, sir.
Okay, first off, we don't send the money back.
Fair enough.
Okay. Secondly, you've been working on this for 2 or 3 months, trying to get this thing positioned. So it's not like you did this today.
Yep.
Okay, and so we've heard about this, and certainly the committee has supported these extra interventions. Okay, and these kids need intervened yesterday, not 2 years from now. Okay, so I don't see why we would delay this and expedite it. If anybody on the committee objects to that, stand up and say it. But I certainly support moving this forward as quickly as we can. And also it's 9:30 now, so let's move on. Does anybody have any comments?
Just real quick, to
Yes,
be
sir.
clear though, Mike, the reading program is a program that will help staff, but the YMCA will run, where the math program is strictly in-house for IASD and is not involving the YMCA in that program.
That's correct, sir. What happened, sir, is the YMCA approached us about this idea. We had talked to the association, work out some details. But in the meantime, there is extra set aside money awarded. We took the money and we thought, well, let's really look at our data with PSSA data. We thought this was the math is the bigger switch that's needed. Because what we
I'm fine with that. I just
Yep.
want to be clear so that everybody understands that one of these programs will be run by the Y, supported by us,
Yep.
and the other program will be strictly an IASD program.
And there's a cost associated on the budget to the YMCA that would go for some equipment. That would be our property, but also the other thing would be for them to pay for some of their staffing as well, to oversee and coordinate the program. Our teachers have to, by contract, provide instruction, and they should. They're incredible teachers. We want to get them in front of our kids, but we're just trying to, once we had the opportunity with more money, we had to switch gears, and we think this is the where we need to go, sir. What I will say, and I know I say this all the time, but our teachers and our principals deserve medals. I mean, the fact that we looked at East Pike, they're about 75% proficient in reading, only a slight drop from last year. Ben Franklin only had about a 6% drop. You're looking at, remember, and let me preface these scores, especially in area of literacy, no interventions provided last year. Remember, due to social distancing, we pulled our reading specialists, made them classroom teachers. And then 3 months prior to that, March, April, May, and June, those teachers, we had the shutdown. So what they've been able to do in the area of literacy to hold the line I think is remarkable considering the pandemic. However, we have to start focusing towards math as that continues to be a concern that we're seeing identified in the district.
On the literacy thing, I remember that the national average was 21% fall off. And we're patting ourselves on the back for only falling 6%. But the data also showed that we recovered that by mid-November last year.
And I think you add in the summer program.
Yeah,
we can do
I
a lot
want
of
to,
good.
I mean, congratulations. Okay, we could be bailing water right now, but we are where we need to be, and we can get better. And that's what this program's for.
It is, and it also is credit to the board. You told us, look, keep schools open, do whatever you can do. My God, did we have to figure out a lot of things during the last 3 years, but we did. And right now, this is an opportunity to help more kids, and this is what we're respectfully requesting, sir.
Any objections from the committee? Can we move ahead? Okay.
Okay. Next, number 3 is relatively simple. I'll give Justin about a minute or two. There's another PCCD grant.
A minute.
A minute. Don't over. We'll give him a minute to talk about a grant opportunity that we feel comfortable we can compete for. This is a competitive grant. We'd like to submit a proposal to help offset some cost. As you know, previous years, the district was not very successful in competitive grants. At some levels, in the last 4 years, we brought in close to $500,000 in competitive grants. We're asking for permission to apply for another one through Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. In the area of mental health and trauma. But Justin, do you want to give a minute overview, please?
Yeah, so the grant that's available is through PCCD. It's a mental health support grant. We will have the opportunity to apply for up to $150,000, and we'll apply for that amount. We'll apply for $150,000 with your approval. So there's 3 main goals for the grant. One being increasing the availability of trained support staff and other professionals, and that's the route that I think we should go in. The other is identifying local needs for mental health supports, and then the third one is increasing partnerships, and I think we can find ways to incorporate all 3 of those big goals into one grant. So just seeking your permission to do that.
Any objection?
Not at all. Do it.
Made it? Okay. Put it on the agenda.
Next one, staffing is going to take some time. What I'd like to do is give you an overview now, and then Ms. Cinda, if it's okay with you, we'll add this to your committee as well. That way you have about a week to digest this and see what you want to do, but we are asking for permission on Monday night, next Monday, to post and start to interview an application process. Under staffing, we would like to, as we discussed before, Ms. Cinda's committee as well as yours, Mr. Hurley, to go forward with replacing Ms. Mock at East Pike due to retirement with a full-time certified school nurse. We tried numerous times to hire an LPN. We were unsuccessful. This will also help us with our partnership with IUP to be able to send students there now under supervision of a school certified nurse. So we're asking that permission. We're also asking permission to hire and post and interview up to 5 elementary teachers due to retirement. What we did was we hyperlinked the class size guidelines. And if you look at the class size guidelines, we kept them relatively small. Why? Because we just realized that, next year may be the first year back. We're lucky, back to normalcy. So we value the manageable class sizes and allows us to put us in a position of strength. We may not need up to 5. We're going to look at that, but we're going to ask to hire up to 5. And then, that way we don't have to come back to the board. Additionally, at the senior high, due to retirement, we're asking to hire a biology teacher, family and consumer science position, social studies, and then the board's going to have to make a decision what they want to do with regarding driver's education. Rob sent you a video asking you to make a decision upon that. That can make an impact whether or not we need a physical education position. But before we, really address any more than that, the one new position I'd like to talk about is the creation of a behavioral mental health coordinator / school psychologist here at the high school. I met with the guidance counselors, I met with the school psychs and the secondary administration last Friday, and I also met with them today, and asking them about what they're seeing at their buildings, at the junior high, at the high school, regarding some mental health issues, regarding some of the just challenging circumstances that kids are working under. You look at anxiety, depression, etc. And, we're trying to really meet the board's wish. The board pushed us continuously. What are you doing for the high school? What are you doing for the junior high? So what we thought we would do is we can come forward tonight and say with pretty much 100% accuracy that we are going to be under budget. So if if we have 16 people retiring, right now we're filling 15 positions. So we are -1, even with this new position. but we want to have a conversation with you about this position to see if this is what the board was looking for, to see if this is something the board would support. The principals met today again, and I met with the school psychs and guidance counselors. They are all part of that meeting today, and we met on Friday. They think additional support is needed. What I'd like to do now is turn the floor over, if you're okay with it, Ms. Harley, to our school psychs to let them present exactly what they're doing to try to treat the issue. And before I turn the floor over them, as the ESSER's money runs out, this could be a part of how we solve it long term as well. This person will be a full-time collective bargaining member. This would be a full-time person here in the district that would be added to the team to help address some of the issues and challenges we're facing. But I wanted to give them the floor to talk about the rationale, give them the floor, talk about the need, and then you can ask any questions. And I'll introduce the team. Dr. Angela Masters and Ms. Shelley Wright and Ms. April Morelli are our full-time school psychs. 2 years ago, as you know, we had outside services through the IU, so we had 1.75. Fast forward, 3-4 years later, now we're up to 3. And we're to be honest with you and the rest of this committee is I'm coming back and asking for another one. And hopefully tonight they'll convince you on the need and the rationale behind it. And then I ask you to ask any questions. We also have an exceptional intern from IUP, Ms. Kylie Froelich, who is a part of her team. And this is part of her work to come here and say, look, this is why it's needed. This is why it's important. She has a lot of expertise and background in the area of mental health. And I ask you and I encourage you, be gentle, but be relentless and asking the questions that you want to know, because this is something that is taboo in some places. This is something that also results in skepticism. And this is something I want to be clear with the committee on. You've asked us to look at how we get more services. This is our answer. And I know it comes with another staff position, but I think you'll be impressed by what the ladies have to present. Justin, Rob, before I turn over to them, anything I misspoke on that you want to clarify or anything?
No, sir. I think you can go in and to go.
Mr. Harley, is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Randy, we're good?
Actually, you don't even.
I think you don't even need it.
I think you can use that one, and the ladies in the back may need to use that one.
Okay, sounds good. So I would like to introduce Kylie to kind of share a little bit. We've been pouring through the local PAYS data from this school year, which is preliminary. We don't have all of it. And I provided as many copies as I could to the table here. There were a few extras down there. So our team, in looking at the PAYS data, has kind of decided, how do we tackle this head on? Because really, the evidence from the students and what they're reporting was very crystal clear that we have to take a look at what the students need. And just before Kylie would get started, we learned about how that information is gone through. And so they go through and they take out any surveys that don't meet the validity criteria. And so that was helpful, because sometimes it's easy to say, like, well, how do we know the kids took this seriously? They actually have a process for that, which was, I think, helpful for us in interpreting some of the data. So Kylie's going to kind of share a little bit from local need to what we know nationally about student mental health, and then how we could tackle this from a systemic perspective. So, Kylie.
So we can go ahead and get started. Yeah, thank you, Randy. So first, we just like to give you some highlights from our PAYS data, which you have in front of you. But we are looking at this 2021 data and looking at trends from previous years of data as well. So we'd like to highlight some of that in these areas. So what we found was that students were reporting increased feelings of depression, which the survey defines as feeling so sad or hopeless for almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row, that the students felt like they had to stop doing some of their usual activities. So about 1 in 3 of our students reported that they met that criteria for depressive symptoms, which is pretty shocking. And about
Before you go any further, this is Indiana data?
Correct, yes,
This is
thank
not
you.
national data.
This
This
is our
isn't somebody from
district.
Philadelphia. This is Indiana.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure everybody understands that. This is our kids.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. We also found that 18% of our students had reported that they seriously considered committing suicide in the past year. And of our students, 15% reported that they made a plan to commit suicide, and 10% indicated that they had actually attempted to commit suicide in the past year. We also found that students were reporting increased alcohol and other drug use. On average, about 1 in 3 of our students in grades 8 to 12 reported alcohol consumption, which is concerning in and of itself. But when we look at that in tandem with the mental health statistics, it's even more concerning for student outcomes.
And was there increase in drug use as well? Because right now that's a relatively high or hot topic in the community.
Yes, so I believe that the PACE data looks at prescription drug use and marijuana use. And because this is preliminary data, I don't know that we have all of the information to look at those trends over the years. So I can't say with confidence whether there were those increases, but we do know that students are reporting substance use.
Okay.
So hopefully when we get the full data report in April, we'll be able to give them more data.
10% translates to 80 kids in this high school attempted suicide last year. Okay, that's scary as looking at. 80 kids walking around these halls, one out of every 10. Go keep going.
And this is for 6 through 12, right? Or
The
is this
survey
not?
6 through 12, but I think we
So
were
is that-
trying to look at, go ahead, Kylie, because we were working on this together.
Yeah, that's okay. We were just highlighting 8 to 12 in this data.
Okay, so this, okay, that's,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And just for background, surveys issued sixth grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade.
And initially, I think when we were developing the presentation, it's not that 6th grade wasn't important. I think we were looking at it from a high school level first. But then as we were kind of having conversations with the high school and April and Shelley, they're the school psychologists assigned to those buildings, so they can speak more to this. But I think what we were realizing is this wasn't an isolated situation to the high school, which then required us to kind of shift to also looking at junior high. So when we were putting this together, initially it was summarizing that 8 to 12 data, but you do have the results for 6th grade within that PACE report in front of you. That's the preliminary. And then once we get the full report, you'll have the whole big picture that dives in item by item as well.
And that gives you longitudinal data as well that I think Mr. Schroeder was asking about. So we don't have it right now because they're still preliminary, but they'll fold in the last couple of years so you can see trends.
Yeah, and I think that that's the missing piece that we didn't have with the preliminary data that we were hoping to have sooner than later.
We also have data, sorry.
I was just going to say, you're also going to, let me actually, I'll clarify rather than make a statement. Do you think there's a lot of students suffering from depression and anxiety as a result of the past 2 or 3 years and how they may have some trouble with attendance, reacclimating to school, being around others for some time? They weren't. And do you think that's maybe, I don't know if it's causation or correlation to some of the data you're seeing and how that provides difficulty both academically and behavioral?
Yeah, I think a lot of those factors could exacerbate issues that were already there, if not create issues that were not there before. So I think that's a likely probable cause.
And just as a side note to the data that we see from our school district, what we did see, and you can see if you go on to the website, you can see the county-wide numbers. What's most alarming, I think, is that these numbers for feeling depressed, considering suicide, making a plan for suicide, these numbers are actually a little bit less on our district in comparison to the county-wide averages.
Thank you for sharing that. We also have information on students' perceptions of school climate, which is really important to highlight because the role of school climate works very much closely with student mental health and student social emotional outcomes. And so we would like to share with you that our students are reporting 18% of our students indicated on the PACE survey that they felt unsafe at school. About 23% of our students in grade 8 through 12 indicated that they don't have a lot of time to talk one-on-one with teachers, which says to us that our students are not feeling that connectedness and those relationships to the school, which can have a very negative impact on student mental health outcomes. And about 45% of our students indicated that they don't have positive feedback from their teachers when they work hard, which is very sad and again just reflective of maybe some work that could be done on school climate and connectedness and relationships between students and educators.
And I think too, just to add to that, we have awesome teachers, and I'm sure that what I feel like I've seen is more students needing more affirmation. So it's maybe not that our teachers aren't doing it. It's just that this desire for more affirmation. And also, this is just observational data, but when it comes to unsafe at school and Mr. Vukovic's question about feeling unsafe, a lot of kids were concerned about getting sick and if their friends are going to make them sick. And so it's not a threat per se from getting into a fight or something like that, but a lot of students, I think that's the long-term impact and some of the increased
And
anxiety.
I think too, Ange, that when I see that number down there, 45% indicated absence of positive feedback for their hard work from teachers. Those are high school students. And keep in mind too, that at the high school level, we haven't yet started school-wide positive behavior support. And that's something that's in the work. We've actually just started the process with Wade, Doug, and myself, meeting with Patan and the IU to get that started and get that set up. But the idea behind PBIS as a tier 1 program is to, emphasize those expectations for students and reinforce and acknowledge the positive things that are happening. So I think once that does happen, you'll see those numbers continue to decrease through time.
And Mr. Harley, it's important to note, today's meeting was focused on what can we do operationally to provide more time for these type of meaningful connections, relationships. So please, I don't want to give a false precedent that one new position will solve all the cures or all of our ailments, but it's a part of a recipe. We met today to talk about what we're going to do, and be advised, we'll bring that back to the committee, how we can build in more time. Because the one thing that stood out to me is kids just wanted time with their teachers. There was like 50%. I can't quote the number, but
it was 60-something.
60, yeah, it was
Said that
high.
They missed that positive connection with students. They wanted to come back to school after COVID because they were longing for that connection with teachers and staff. So that's important.
And that's not a shame on teachers. Please don't take it that way. It's just,
No,
there's a lot on everyone's plate, and it's just, it's a testament to what they've done. So we're looking at our schedule, what we could do to be more reflective of that need, give them time for that. Because like anything else, it has to be a priority. So we'll come back and see what we can do with that as well.
And I think from the MTSS, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, you finish yours.
Finish my sentence real quick. Yeah. So I think about MTSS, and I know this is focused on mental and behavioral health, but I feel like we've started K-5 with an MTSS framework, kind of hitting all of the essential elements. And now it's like our system is outgrown. Like our students are moving through the system that have already been through MTSS, and now they're into the junior high, and they're going to quickly be into the high school. So I also feel like this is the other reason why we've hit that point of needing to address the systemic side of it.
So my question, Ange, is this. When I look at this PAYS data, intuitively, my gut tells me that all these various categories and the increases in these categories is related somehow. What I don't know is how are they related? So is that something that you can provide, Justin can provide, the relationship that I understand the relationship between the depression and the suicide, but how does that impact the alcohol? How does that impact the smoking? How does
So
that
sometimes
impact?
that's self-medication. So if
Okay.
students are hurting and they're seeking ways to, and this is during pandemic years, not during pandemic years, sometimes you'll see that students will self-medicate, and so then they feel relief from symptoms that they're having. And this doesn't mean that all of these are to a clinical level necessarily, but I think from a systemic perspective, it's telling us that if we can build this system to provide these supports for students, teach the coping skills. I think that's the other thing. Students who look like they have it all together, I think it's the coping skills that we need to integrate across the board so that when they encounter, how do you persevere when something gets hard and not feel that extra stress and anxiety about performing to a certain level. Family situations, we know the pandemic, and I think that that's where having the full report will help us, because I have last year's full report, which is much more in depth. So I think to dig in and look to see what is interrelated and how it's interrelated will give us, like Dr. Runge said, some longitudinal data to look at.
Okay, because Mike and I have had this conversation, and one of the questions that I posed for him is that at some point I would like, whether it's this committee or a different one, or even the whole board, some sort of a comprehensive look, number one, at what we're already doing. Okay, and I know you were talking about MTS and a lot of different things that the public may not follow all the alphabet soup
Thank
there.
you for the reminder. I always
Okay.
forget. I'm sorry.
Okay, but some sort of comprehensive look at how, and I realize that we can't be the single solution to this, that this is really a community effort, okay, involving other moving parts. But the question is, what are we currently doing right now? What is our role? What are we currently doing right now to reduce this? And then the follow-up question is, what are the additional things that we should be seriously be looking at?
Yeah, so I think this is part of our presentation. When you're ready, we can move forward to share some of the ideas that we have from the systemic perspective to look at that.
And Ange, if I could just jump in real quick.
Please, yes.
So I think what we've been doing at Ben Franklin for the last couple of years, and what we've started doing with our mental health workers at all of our other buildings, including the junior high, I think when we look at that whole system, and when Ange talks about that MTSS process, what I think of is, how do we get to all students, right? And I think the way that we get to all students is by doing PBIS, and at our elementary schools, we're using a social emotional learning program. And I think the other thing that we do is we screen students. We screen for, those internalized behaviors like sadness, anxiety, depression, and we screen for externalized issues that students are having, like physical, verbal aggression. So then we identify those students that are having issues, and then we look at their discipline referrals, we talk to principals, we talk to guidance counselors, so we identify a group of students that need those additional supports. And then we identify, okay, so if little Justin is struggling and he's got, high screener numbers in the area of physical aggression, and he also has discipline referrals that are really high, and a lot of his discipline referrals are related to fights, physical aggression, that sort of thing, then we tailor our interventions to those. And then we look at those evidence-based interventions, like, for aggression. One of them that we've had all of our guidance counselors trained on is anger replacement therapy. And so that's an intervention that we would provide for those students. And so we would collect data for those students, just like we would for academics like reading or math. So if a student is struggling in reading, we would get them apply an intervention, right? And we would collect data, and then we would look at, is this student responding to that intervention? If they are, great, and let's try to fade away those supports. If they're not responding to that intervention, then it's what types of intensive, more individualized supports can happen for those students. So in this case, we provide that tier one, that base, that PBIS, the social emotional learning, and then those students that we identify through that screener, we get them small group support that are tailored to their individual areas of concern. And if they're not making progress when we're collecting data, then we're looking at, okay, now what types of individualized or more intensive supports would those students need? And so we've built that system starting with Ben Franklin a couple years ago with the board support. We've rolled that out through some of our other buildings. And I think through this, and almost to be in complete alignment with that vision, that system, with us doing this at the high school, I think there's some added things at the high school that we have to worry a little bit more about, as far as the PAYS data is concerned, and with drugs and alcohol. So I think this is, and I don't want to steal away from the presentation, but I almost think that alignment is really going to be key here.
Justin, I do have a question there. As you were explaining those tiers and the interventions, who specifically is doing, I know the teachers, the tier one, it's mainly the classroom teachers, and they're doing the PBIS and all of that. So then when you get to the other tiers, who's actually doing those interventions?
So at Ben Franklin, East Pike, Eisenhower, and the junior high right now, we have the mental health workers through ACRP that are providing, they're doing check-in, check-out for students. And all check-in, check-out is there, it's an adult who builds a good, positive relationship with a student, who checks in with them at the beginning of the day and then again at the end of the day. And those students are taking a form to their classrooms. Their teachers are rating them 0 for not so good, 1 for so-so, and 2 for they're really doing excellent.
On some established goal.
Yeah, on their established goals. And then that data is collected, and we have a group at each building that meets every 2 weeks that talks about that student's data, which students are doing well.
And this is a group of whom? When you're talking about this group
So
that meets, who is?
Yeah, so that would be the principal, myself, the school psychologist, school psychology interns,
School counselors.
school counselors, So that group, when that group meets, we look at who's not making progress. Then we look at the students that are making progress. The kids that aren't making progress, we're looking at what can we do as far as groups, what additional interventions and supports can we provide for those students. And then the kids that are doing well,
So your
it's
school psychologists are doing those groups. They're the ones. that are
school
doing them.
psychologists and the mental health workers at the other buildings.
We have quite a few students in need, so we've been trying to build and develop as many groups and individual sessions as we can based on student need. And I know April and Shelley can speak to the groups that they've been doing. Right now, I'm getting one situated for trauma. I'm actively engaged in the aggression replacement training, and then Coping Cat. And we've also collaborated with IUP School Psych Department, and we've have several groups running at Eisenhower. And then I know Miss Eisenman and Mrs. Obarto have been working with skill streaming, and at the high school, I think you've been working with a skill streaming group. And then April, I forget all the groups and things that you guys have been doing collaboratively.
And how many times a week then are you meeting with each group of students?
Generally, it's once a week, which would be similar to like a therapeutic type setting. And with good response, I have some progress monitoring data from the students that I've been working with in Coping Cat specifically. The response is, it's cool to see it come out in a standardized way because I use a standardized rating scale as part of that. So it's nice to see after a period of time that information, plus the teacher may say, you know, this student's so much happier now. They're kind of coming out of their shell. Now can we focus on this? Because once they can develop those coping strategies, other things come up. So that's kind of the work that we've been doing as school psychologists. I think what we've realized is that in the absence of a tier 1 system, we're going to struggle a lot. I'm sorry, I forgot Mrs. Brillhart. She's doing a nice job with groups too.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's also important to note that teachers at any point in time in the school year can make a referral. So although we use the screeners to really help us begin to formulate, things happen. Life happens. Children experience trauma at any given time. And so teachers will then create a referral, and then we will then discuss the child and things that we can put in place to help her. I had a really interesting conversation with a first grader, in fact, just last week, that was having some trouble on the bus. And when I followed up with, you know, what can I do to help you? And the child said, you know, I think I need check in, check out. I did it in kindergarten, and I think I need to be checking in and checking out, and then somebody can talk to me and remind me about the bus. And my jaw dropped. This is a 6-year-old. Okay, great, buddy. I'm going to sign up that referral right now.
Self-referral in the first
So it works.
No, and that's a great point too, Kelly. And I don't know what I can't remember what the last number. So we look at the percentage of students successful in check in, check out. I think yours was at 80%. I think East Pikes was at about 85% last week. So it is having a good impact on kids.
Okay, so each group is once a week. So approximately how many groups then are you meeting with a week, would you say?
Oh gosh, let me top of my head here.
I mean, each individual.
I can speak to Eisenhower if you help. At Eisenhower, we currently have 4 Coping Cat groups running, 2 for 4th grade, 2 for 5th grade, 1 male, 1 female for each grade. And Dr. McLaughlin's through the Department of Ed Psych are running those groups for us. JC Kirkland, who is our ACRP worker, is running 2 groups focusing on skill streaming, specifically with conflict resolution for 1 5th grade group, 1 4th grade group. Mr. Barto and I and Mr. Scardina and Miss Lockery will be starting 2 skill streaming groups this week, 1 4th grade, 1 5th grade. We're focusing on feelings, Mrs. Obarto and I, and they're focusing on conflict as well. We also have a pilot situation started with the Armstrong Indiana Clarion Drug and Alcohol Commission, where they have a prevention specialist coming in using evidence-based program, Too Good for Drugs, working with a group of 4th graders and 5th graders for those kids that have those kinds of family kind of issues. So right now we have almost 12 groups running in our building.
Thank you.
Sure.
And you guys can speak for yours. I have 5, and then I oversee the Coping Cat groups while they're with us.
And we have 2 currently running skill streaming, and then in anxiety, it's more used at this point for one of them. And I would say, just kind of to speak to the point of the presentation tonight, I think that being able to have a system in place at the high school is going to allow us to have more groups, because at this point we aren't screening. So being able to identify the students that would fit into particular groups is difficult because we don't have a screener to identify them, and then we don't have the structure that the other buildings currently have to be able to provide the, you know, the systemic groupings and making sure that we have all of this support.
Yeah, currently, I'm in two buildings, the junior high and East Pike, so both buildings now have ACRP workers, and they'll be getting groups up and running after they have some check-in, check-out data for the next, you know, previous months and into this month. And then Kylie and I have been working on like an executive functioning group as well, which works on organization and planning at our junior high. And then I also have a coping cat group, so.
Mr. Hart, we do have one question in the chat. Is how can we gather data, analyze the data to show results? I'll defer to you, ladies.
I believe that system could operate similarly to that's already in place at our elementary grades. We use the student risk screening scale, the SRSS, which is a teacher-completed questionnaire that looks at this internalizing and externalizing behaviors, and we can identify students that are popping up as at risk in both or either of those areas. And so this proposed position would employ a person who would be responsible for analyzing that data and identifying students that fall within the tiered systems of supports based on their level of need.
Yeah, just to add in there, you know, as far as, you know, that SRSS is going to provide us with, you know, the data of the, you know, the percentages, that'll give us percentages of kids that would be at risk, you know, at a medium risk or high risk. But then we also look at our, you know, office discipline referral system, and we can look at, you know, the total numbers of disciplinary referrals that are happening as a school-wide. So if I'm looking at how is our tier 1 doing, I'm looking at that SRSS. I want to see reductions in the amount of students that are at medium or high risk. But then I also want to see an overall reduction in total discipline referrals. I want to see an overall reduction in suspensions in school and out of school. And then I also look at individual. So if I'm looking at a small group level, I'm looking at those students that are in those small groups, like the social skills groups, the coping cat groups, those sort of things. And I'm looking at those students individually and looking at their check-in, check-out data that's being collected. And I'm determining whether they're making progress or not. And then again, even at beyond that, you know, when you look at the individual level, you're looking at, there's some pre-post test type data that we can also collect as part of those groups.
So I have a question. How would children be identified that don't have behavior problems, that maybe are those suicide risks, who are the quiet kids that just do their work, internalize everything, and nobody knows that anything's going on?
So the SRSS does provide a distinction between the two. So you can look for students who are elevated in externalizing only, internalizing only, or both. And then I like to scoop in the school nurse as well as teacher input once those come up, because we know students who try to escape. And oftentimes we get physical symptoms from feeling anxious or feeling depressed. And so getting that information from the school nurse. And then I also think that building connections, when students have the opportunity to build connections with a trusted adult, it takes one trusted adult, and it could be anyone that just shows that vested interest. So I think the more opportunities that students even have to share, and the well-trained that teachers are to identify some of those risk factors as well as protective, so that they could even say, hey, I think that maybe, you know, I could get you connected with some help. Dr. Runge, did I see your hand?
The other thing to keep in mind is once you hit junior high, your screening options are now much broader, and you don't necessarily have to rely on teachers to fill it out, because it also becomes kind of weird at the high school level, like who's the teacher going to fill out, like you have the English teachers do it and they feel like they're being singled out. And so you can actually pivot to self-reports. And that's where you can get at some of those internalizing problem issues like anxiety, depression, and so forth, that wouldn't necessarily be observed by the 10 teachers or the 8 teachers that a kid has for 43 minutes a day or whatever it might be. But that's an option that as you move MTSS systems into junior, senior high, you have to consider what's going to be the screener, and you have more options with self-reports.
And I think that that's been the layer of us digging into what does this look like and what tools are going to give us the best information. Because if we're screening and collecting some sensitive information, making sure that it's the right tool.
So you're not there yet. You haven't decided.
We haven't disseminated anything at the junior or the junior high, right?
It's not SRSS.
Yes, not the senior.
Senior
No.
high is the only one that
Okay.
hasn't yet.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would just add is I think attendance can also tell us a lot, because I think by the time you get to high school, you can see some of the students have checked out for various reasons. So I think including attendance in the discussion that we're having is going to be extremely important to do.
All right, lady.
Thank you.
Is there more? I'm
Advance the
sorry.
slide. Yeah, I was gonna say, we can advance. I almost feel like we could advance a couple slides.
Yeah, we took you off the train, sorry. Off the train.
This one, there is some important things I'd like to highlight on this slide before we move on. So here we're looking at our national prevalence rates for adolescent mental health, and some of this will sound familiar. You can look at some of those statistics related to depression and anxiety. We know that as adolescents move through the developmental period, we see as they increase with age, we see increased risk for development of these types of mental and behavioral health challenges. And over time, these prevalence rates are increasing among students as well. What's really noteworthy is on average, about 50% of our youth at a national level are in need, who are in need of mental health treatment do not receive it. And interestingly, about 75% of those students who do receive mental health treatment get it in the schools. So schools are really uniquely positioned to respond to this need. And given the information that we have and the student reportings that we have at the district, I think we could argue that it's really our duty to do so. So we can move on from here. It's also really important to highlight some of the outcomes related to student development, whether we intervene or if we don't. So we know that students who do not receive the mental health treatment that they're in need of have a slew of associated negative outcomes, such as educational underachievement. They're more at risk to drop out of school, have social difficulties, physical health conditions in the future, continuation and worsening of mental illness, unemployment and occupational difficulties later in life, continued substance abuse issues, incarceration, homelessness, poor quality of life, and suicidality. So there's quite a range of negative consequences that can ultimately be fatal for students if we don't respond. On the positive end of things, we know that there are a lot of great outcomes that can come from meeting students' mental and behavioral health needs. So when these systems of support are put in place, evidence suggests that students' engagement and learning increases. As a result of that, we see better educational academic achievement outcomes. Students report increased senses of connectedness to schools, more relationships with their schools and teachers in the school. School climate improves. I know that was part of the discussion earlier today, so it's important to note that this type of system has an impact on that as well. Classroom behavioral difficulties are reduced, which again allows more time for instruction, so that in turn increases achievement. Discipline and dropout rates are reduced, and students just learn the skills and coping strategies to become healthy and successful adults with a greater sense of well-being.
Could you advance us? There you go. Oh, back. There you go. That's perfect. So now we can talk a little more specifically about what this role might look like and how, through a preventative lens, we can meet our students' needs. So a lot of the stuff coming up will sound familiar, but we'd like to share with you kind of just the summary of the vision that we have for this, which is to advance wellness and mental health through a continuum of developmentally appropriate services and supports designed to enhance community and school connectedness, resiliency, and skill building. And I think that it's important to note the wellness piece because we all have mental health. And so there are different coping strategies and just things that we know help us feel better, like making sure we take a walk or we engage in yoga or we hang out with a friend or we read a book or we draw or we go shoot hoops. So I think it's not just a focus on pathologizing or treating students, but kind of creating an overall tier one where we're teaching students how to manage stress and cope with stress, because it's something that as an adult, we know that regardless of the situation, we're going to encounter different stressors. And then from there, even if we do need mental health treatment, sometimes it can be short-term, sometimes it can be long-term. So I think that that's something important to focus on when we talk about this prevention piece, is really making sure that our students have the most effective coping strategies and skills to be successful.
So here we can look more closely at what this role would look like and the system that we're proposing as well. I believe that some of you may have a handout that has this image on it. And this image is borrowed from the National Association of School Psychologists, and this represents kind of that multi-tier system of support for mental and behavioral health services. So it's just important to note that a lot of the things have already been mentioned, so I can kind of breeze past these, I think, but this system would really employ a lot of strategies at a universal level, as far as screening procedures, identification procedures for student difficulties, as well as just overall general best practices for teachers and other school staff to respond to these needs, promote positive behavioral outcomes. And then through those screening procedures and those identification processes, we will be able to find students who are at need for more intensive treatment or intervention. And so this proposed position would employ somebody who would be knowledgeable about evidence-based strategies that have been demonstrated as efficacious for responding to those needs. And through the progress monitoring procedures that Justin spoke about, we will be able to find students that are responding appropriately, transition them out of those supports, and those that are not responding appropriately will move to more intensive levels of support.
And what I like about this graphic, you see where some of that blue shading comes in. That is where you'd be looking at also having community support, so that, you know, we don't want to, it's impossible for us to do it all on our own. And so we value the resources that are embedded in our community. And so looking at that slightly shaded, the more blue you get, the more community support may be necessary and needed to support students. So you could see that as it would get to the few students, those would be students who might need more family counseling, psychiatric services, and long-term individual therapy and care.
Yeah, just to add in on that too. You know, I've always questioned, I've talked with the school psychologist and I've talked with staff at all of the buildings, and I would always ask the question, you know, if you know that you have a student that's at a medium risk, right, and you do nothing about it, you know, what happens to that student? And my thought would be, my guess would be that they either stay the same or potentially even become high risk. And I would say the same thing with, you know, those students that are high risk. If we do nothing to intervene, I would imagine that they stay at high risk or, you know, and are a much greater risk for, you know, dropping out of school, teen pregnancy, those types of really poor outcomes. And you don't know any of this, the medium or the high risk, without doing that screening that's involved.
So this is just a slide that's really reflective of this proposed model's alignment with Hatton's best practices for secondary MTSS in Pennsylvania. So really this system would look at systemic approaches to responding to student needs, and then also looking more specifically at student level services. I'm not sure if there's much else to highlight here.
Randy, one more, please. Thank you.
So these are just some summarized points of how we can really bring this vision to life. So this proposed role would really employ somebody who would be the coordinator of the system, who would really build capacity at the district through consultation and education with our existing staff to implement these evidence-based strategies and to always use data-driven practices to respond to the needs of our students, and also evaluate the efficacy of the types of programs that we're employing. So as we move through the future years of this system, we can identify what's working and what's not based on that objective data that we're collecting throughout the year.
So Mr. Harley, we'll defer to the committee for any questions or comments. Again, as we talked about earlier, I think it's 16 retirements. We would feel one of the 16 with this position. We're still one person to minus because of decreasing class sizes. If you look at our class size schedule, or I'm sorry, class sizes, the chart is very conducive to learning. So we didn't really sacrifice much, but we wanted to bring it forward to the committee for discussion, vet it through, this week and next week, and bring it back up at Lucinda's. There's a cost associated with it, but it's within our budget. We still think we're being fiscally responsible, where the committee can dictate and decide what they want to do if you are interested in the position. You can come back and say it should be a school psych. You can make it a school counselor. My position is, why am I recommend school psych? We're seeing more and more threat assessments having to be conducted. And I want someone with the proper type of background and training that when crisis can't answer our calls because they don't have enough workers to go around, that someone can make a decision whether or not we're safe to let a kid back in school or not. So you have some leeway. It's up for the committee to decide. I am recommending it's a school psych position, and this would really help go a long way in meeting some of the needs at the high school. It's a little backwards what we've done. We kind of built at K to 5. We built with a tier 1 level. This is more of a tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 level because they're going to be working in all different realms. But we think, long term, this will put us in a very strong position. We think it's comparable to what best practices across the country. And we look at the ratio of school psychs to students, when you look at the type of supports we have in place. But we would defer humbly to the committee for any questions or clarification that you have.
But all you're asking for today is permission to post. So,
Well,
we could certainly recommend that to the board now, and this discussion can continue in these other committees.
We're not even asking for permission to post. We're seeing what questions you are, see if this meets the needs that you asked us to charge us with. We would like to, Ms. Cinda, if you're okay with it, your committee, go through all these positions one more time. That gives you a week to digest it, and then we can decide. I'd like to decide that night, Ms. Cinda, at the regular board meeting, to post these positions, only because, sir, full disclosure, I'd like to be done with hiring by June 30th if we could. It's been, the last 3 years have been tough, and if we can get the hiring done before
Mike,
July.
you gotta stop whining. I mean,
it would make it easier for us, right?
What is our student ratio now?
To school psychologists, it's about 1 to 1,000, I believe, roughly.
A little bit under 1,000.
A little
What
bit
about
under
2,900?
1,000. It's probably like 850 or so.
850,
but a tremendous improvement over where we were 4 years ago.
No doubt.
I think
No
we
doubt.
had a part-time psychologist, and that was about it.
We had 1.75, and all they did was evals. I mean, and I don't want to put Dr. Runge in a spot or the ladies, but the monumental shift they made over the last 3 years from just an eval type of vision to a comprehensive psych model is just, it's remarkable.
Yeah, and we started this in the elementaries, and the results of the elementaries were pretty spectacular in moving people down tiers, which means that the junior high doesn't have to deal with it. So
And Justin, what appropriate placements do we have for the students who have severe behavior problems? I know you have play skills and learning supports and all of that.
You're talking like out of school placements?
Or even within school or within the district.
So as far as special education programming, we have, learning support program, life skills options. We have autistic support that's now in the district that wasn't a few years ago. But there's also we also have the partial hospitalization option, which would be Alpha. And then there's also a couple local places that we have students. We have students that are at Presley Ridge, Johnstown, Presley Ridge, Greensburg. And the students that are in those programs were actually, they have been there it's been a while. They've been in those programs for a while, even prior to my hiring here. And then we have some students that are at New Story for emotional support and for autistic support programming.
We also have Adelphi.
And Adelphi.
Yeah. And Aaron, I don't want to put you in a spot, but Alpha, aren't they reached their capacity?
Alpha's Alpha, yeah, they've had some staffing changes right now, and they're pretty full, but there's a waiting list. So although there's not like a full complement of students right now registered, there's a list that they're going through to get the new students in because they had a director change, so there was some lapse in people getting in and out.
So in the meantime, what are we doing with those students who need that type of placement?
The students are in our buildings and we're servicing their needs the best as we can.
So not only do you have not enough seats, cost associated with that. What's that?
No, you're right, cost.
Yeah.
Very good cost.
Yeah.
And it's not what's in the best interest of people.
Yep.
Frankly, because they go to school with people that they don't live with. So when they go home and they hang out in neighborhoods, they're not in the same class as their neighborhood friends.
So it's just a compounded problem, and then you tie into talent wars with it. I almost feel like I don't want to say we're left on our own. That sounds so dramatic, and I just got yelled at for feeling sorry for myself. It is a challenge, though, that we face. We have two questions, Mr. Harley. One, Madam Vice President asked, what is the current caseload, and what can we expect this person can handle? How many students? So do you want to give them the vision about if the board would consider this, what their reshaping would look like?
Yeah,
Is that fair enough?
so I would offer that the recommended ratio, and Dr. Runge knows that this is not, it's difficult to come by a school psych ratio of 1 to 500 students. That's the national recommendation. The national average is 1 to 1,200. And so the closer that we could get to a 1 to 500 ratio, 1 to 600, 1 to even 700 ratio is kind of what allows us to be as comprehensive as we can. And we do have the school psychologist interns, which obviously we've been able to see how well Kylie has done, but they come to us for a year and then they leave. And so we're training them up into our model as they come in. And so ideally we'd like to, yeah. And it's hard because they become such a part of our team and they've been exceptional. And so as much as we could get to that 1 to 500, 600, like I said, even 700 ratio, I feel like the better we'll be able to help support the system to use data to make decisions, which I think is really important. And then to accurately identify, how to service all of those students through the resources that we have available. And our school counselors are huge assets, and just the ideas that they come up with and how somebody could help build that infrastructure and allocate that time. It's kind of like getting someone that can analyze and look at all that data and say, okay, these kids need this, these kids need this. Now we have to contact families, make sure they're in agreement to the services, plus any of those other things that may happen. So this could look like a couple of things. It could look like we stay status quo as Ange, April, and Shelley, and the new person would only support looking at the data, building the system for mental health and behavioral health. It could look like that person would kind of fulfill the position at the high school and take on school psychologist responsibilities, which would include evaluations, reevaluations, and then the mental health piece of it. And then we threw around the idea of April taking the junior high, and Shelley would take Ben Franklin and Eisenhower, and then I would take East Pike and Horace Mann. So there's a lot of different ways this could look, but if the board would decide that we need to focus on mental health first, the three of us can remain status quo and support the person that would fulfill that role.
Can I just jump in really
Yeah,
quickly
please.
and just say that regardless of, a direction or any of those things, our team works very comprehensively together. So even though I'm at this building or that building, we always jump in to help support because our jobs are to support staff and students.
Mm-hmm.
So however that needs to look is what we will always do.
Yeah, so there's a lot of blurring of the lines. And I think for us, the assignments really just help us keeping track of who's doing what evaluations, which as the system gets steadier on its feet, we're hoping to have fewer referrals for special education because they won't be curriculum casualties, they'll be focused on the system. Our system will allow us to be more comprehensive because we won't be tied up in evaluations so much.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Hart, we'll defer to you. Mr. President?
Yeah, the only thing, Mike, and I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here, but I still think that there is I was 100% support this, but I still think there is a need to kind of evaluate this PACE data in a non-technical way so that the community understands the issues that this data has identified and what we're doing about it, again, in a non-technical manner. I mean, we're gonna ask to hire this additional person, okay? There is an element in the community that's always very cost conscientious. And I recognize that, but if they understand why it's important and what we're actually doing about it, okay, and what we need to do in the future, then I think that becomes a much easier sell to the community. Plus, I'm hoping that if the community recognizes this at a larger level, then, we might get more support, whether it's just moral support or whether it's some additional supports to help us reduce these risky behaviors and drive those numbers the other way. So I really, whether it's the April meeting, the May meeting, or September, but at some point, I think we need to have that kind of a report, program, briefing, whatever you want to call it, so that we can say to the community, here's what's happening and here's what we're doing about it.
I agree.
And I think from that tier 1 level up through the tiers of, how we plan to build connectedness in a community and a culture and climate
and again, in a
Technical way.
Okay, somebody that is not gonna dive into this the way you do specifically, and we do in more general terms, so that they would understand the issues.
I think
You're nodding your head, Kim.
No, you're absolutely, I think you're talking about making the information accessible to people that aren't dorky like me. No, seriously, I mean, because we can geek out on this stuff, but not everybody really gets excited about that. So making it very accessible is, I think, what you're saying, right?
Yes.
And I think we need to keep in mind too, that what jumped out at me was 23% reported they do not have time to talk one-on-one with teachers. So do we need more teachers too? Yeah, I'm not.
That was my comment, because my hand is raised, is that I think the community is more concerned about the 45% of people that aren't necessarily having that positive feedback. So that's the part like really worth this type of position. And then the comprehensive approach to PBIS at the high school level and an all-in focus on getting people the positive interactions. That's what this is all about.
And one thing I thought about the teacher time too, we recently we added the last period as a full period, cutting a few minutes from every period, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have what are the periods at the high school now? 39 minutes with transition in and out. How do you have time to talk to a teacher? So I think I like what you said, Sue, like we need to think about teachers, but we also need to think about how long our class periods are. And does that afford time to build relationships that are needed?
And it's funny you said, because that's exactly what we focused on. We look at our class size guidelines. We felt comfortable with that, but we didn't feel comfortable with is how do we give a meaningful time for this conversation? That's exactly what we were focusing on today.
And I know that, I mean, I supported the increase or the incorporation of that last period as a full period. I have to say that I didn't know it was going to be used every day. I thought it was like in case of emergency, we need to have another class. We have this time. But in hindsight, I think admitting that maybe we did something that isn't working, maybe we need to look at that.
Or maybe looking at it worked at that time, but now with COVID and everything
Yeah.
else, times have changed. And that's exactly what we spent 2 hours on
We
today.
spent a lot of time.
Yeah. 2.5. That's exactly what we focused on today. Now, what does that look like at the junior
How
high
to
and senior
make
high?
more meaningful connections.
Yep. That's
Right.
exactly what we focused on today.
And so I do have one question. Do we as a board get to decide what this position looks like?
What we could do next week is bring the position description to you and see what you think. And in the meantime, you can send us any other ideas that you have. Absolutely.
Because I just have to say that I wouldn't want it to be just a data only person.
No, and I don't
Like,
think
I
that,
want them working.
and I don't
Kids
think
need
that.
the support. We need them
Right.
working
Yeah,
with
right,
kids.
okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that was where I was headed. It was kind of like if we had this new person and we only assign them to the high school. And I will say that for some students that go through an evaluation for emotional or behavioral needs, I'd want the person that's been working with my child to do that. So I think what we would need is a decision on if it would be a person who is a school psychologist, would you want them to be at the high school providing counseling, looking at data, doing the comprehensive school psych model? Or would you want that person to not be responsible for any of the evaluations at that point and only just working on the system? So I think, and part of what we could share with the board, if this would be helpful, is what do our evaluations look like right now as far as how many we've been completing with reevaluation cycles and initial evaluations and things like that to make a good decision. Because we don't want to, whomever this person would be, we don't want to have them bogged down and not be able to fulfill the true purpose of not fixing, that's not the right word, building the system of supports. And so that's why, and Shelley brought up a really good point, our team works so well together that like Shell will go in and model a strategy at the 4-5s, or I'll jump in and do a coaching strategy in first grade, or I'll go. So it's kind of like wherever we're needed and wherever our expertise falls, we're offering support. Yet at the same time, the day-to-day contact for the high school goes through Shelley. The day-to-day contact for the junior high goes through April. So we each have like a point of contact, but if we have to phone a friend or like, hey, Shell, could you run in and do this strategy for me? Or
Yeah. And our first focus, though, correct me if I'm wrong, is addressing the mental health crisis.
Absolutely.
That's our first focus. Getting someone in front of these kids, doing the groups, doing the session, find out what's going on, and getting that built out. And then, oh, by the way, if we could build those other things, good. But we almost need to respond.
And we're doing that at the elementary and at the junior high. I want to keep the focus on we've got to start including the high school. So for me, that's an absolute
So
mandatory.
So my question probably to Justin or Ange is how much of this data evaluation really requires the full school psychologist level? Or how much of it could be done, maybe at a secretarial level for the preliminary part of it, and then have those reports then given to the school psychologist to evaluate.
And we'll have some interns to help out.
So where I'm going with this is, where I'm going with this is, if the real need is at the senior high school doing more of caseload type work.
We can offset that.
But we still have data collection and evaluation, or maybe evaluation isn't the right word, but the collection of that and getting it organized, is that something that an intern or somebody else could do that level for us?
For sure.
And then you've kind of done both.
Yeah. And that's something that I think we've tried to do quite a bit, is to share that with our graduate assistants. But yes, absolutely, because I agree with you. I feel like whatever the person is, the focus is how many students can we don't want to be grabbing a Band-Aid when we need a tourniquet. And that feels like a really drastic analogy, but I feel like if we have an overwhelming amount of need for our students, whether it's just feeling that connectedness or looking at the school climate and culture and working on building that structure, I would rather that person have a primary focus on what's best serving our kids than just looking at numbers. And so, and I think our team kind of shares that a little bit. Justin has a great quick way of sometimes summarizing some data for us too.
So there's, as far as the data, what I would be looking at is you're really looking at the high school level. There's some interventions that we can do, and we could do pre-post test, that sort of thing. But a lot of that is really going to be done through direct service. And I would say that this position is really going to be a lot of direct service as opposed to data collection. At the high school level, we wouldn't be planning on doing check-in, check-out really, because it's not as effective at the high school level as it is at the elementary level. So there's not that big a piece of it. I would say the majority of what we would be doing is providing direct interventions through, some of those tailored groups. So we would look at SRSS numbers that could easily be done by either one of our ACRP people, be it a different building or even one of the school psych interns. And honestly, I see it as direct service to kids.
Mike, I'm going to close this conversation down a little bit. I think the committee supports moving ahead with this position in some way, shape, or form. We certainly are going to rely on the administration and these fine people to write a job description that does the most for our kids. Okay, and and so I don't think the board's function is to write that job description. So we'll react to whatever you bring us, and make sure it's good. Okay, and let's find a person that can fulfill that and more.
Yes, sir.
But I think we have 4D and some other positions you need to talk about.
Yes, sir. And I'll go over quickly. I'd like to stay true, so I'd like to end before 8:30.
You're not going to make that, Mike. You're not going to make it home in time for the show.
Real quick, we're going to do special education, one at the high school. That's a result of Donnie Bowers being appointed as a principal, and then 2 at the elementary level due to retirement. We're also going to look at junior high, business, BCIT, English, dual certs preferred. That can include library. And then the long-term sub, we have someone going on sabbatical. Additionally, in the library, we're looking at hiring a paraprofessional to help out with check out the books and have resources to the books. We had a conversation with the union. We also had a conversation with PDE to make sure a paraprofessional is allowed to serve that function, and they are. And we have that in writing as long as they're not teaching. So we're going to bring forward all of that to Ms. Cinda's committee as well next week. Additionally, we're also going to ask the board to bring back the assistant athletic director. We went without this year. And we thought we could. The amount of workload, game management, everything else, we feel that we need to bring back. the assistant athletic director for the next year.
How often is the athletic director contract renewed? Is that yearly?
It is, and we don't have to do that. That's another conversation. If Ms. Sid does, you could make it 3 years. It depends on what the board wants to do. Like what I used to do was head coaches, we always appoint for 3 years, and then they get to pick their assistants every year. To provide some stability of the program, here in this district, we do every year. There's no set role. We have some leeway and discretion how we want to do that. But I'm also going to talk next week at Ms. Sid's committee about a game manager stipend. Yes, sir.
But the assistant AD is under the union contract.
It's listed under as a
It's an
stipend.
extra duty, extra pay under the union contract.
Yeah, but he's not.
Whereas the AD
is
is an
not.
independent contract.
Right.
I just want to make sure
Yep.
that's a technical problem.
Yep. And then we're also going to ask the Mr. Cinda's committee to think about having a game manager stipend for the remainder of the year. We have really used Greg a lot to be a lot of places at once. I think he needs some additional help. And we'd like to try to do a game stipend manager. We talked about the last academic plan. We'd like to do it for the final this semester this year.
The problem with the spring sports is that the games get canceled because of weather or postponed. And so there's a lot of rescheduling in the springtime. That doesn't happen in the wintertime or even in the fall. But I know that one spring, gosh, it was dozens and dozens of reschedulings. So that would be one of the things the game manager would be doing.
And please don't think it's a slight on Greg. Greg's working above and beyond. I think more hands are needed. I thought we could do without, and that was wrong. Any other questions on the positions? I think we leave the rest for Ms. Cinda's committee, respectfully, because there's a lot more to go over, and it's getting late. But are there any questions on the positions? Because what we would like to do, again, take it to Ms. Cinda's committee.
Why don't we hold the questions to policy and personnel?
Okay.
Because Cinda her committee doesn't go long enough. Thank you. You're welcome.
That's because we have a board meeting afterwards.
Maybe.
She doesn't have a choice.
Okay.
So that's all I have, Mr. Harley. I think what I could do for next week, add synchronous. I think that needs to be a conversation. We could talk about the literacy graduate assistants next week as well, because it's not time
You're
sensitive.
talking about Cinda's committee?
Yeah, at Cinda's committee.
You mean I have to come to another committee?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then the rest are just, FYIs. We have a site visit from Titusville. Folks are coming to visit us. So we're excited about that. Again, the work that the teachers and the principals are doing are being recognized. And then Greg's not here, so we really can't talk about junior high athletics. And then girls wrestling, I just put on there as FYI.
Yeah,
I know we had a conversation about it.
Greg, I see on the board over here that he's having a meeting about the girls' sports that we had questions about. Have him add the girls wrestling to that and see if there's any interest in pursuing this at that level.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd also like to congratulate the baseball coach. His JV team has 26 kids on it, and he didn't cut a single kid. And he's going to train them all and let them all play at the JV at the high school level. He told them that only some will dress and every game will be different. But the 26 kids, that's phenomenal. That's Mr. Thompson's done a great job, and that means that we have there's only 9 kids that are going to play, and maybe a squad's 12 or 13, but he's keeping every kid and he's working with every kid. And I want to congratulate him for doing that.
Absolutely, we can do that. So just to recap, you know about the athletic or the different positions. We brought that forward. We'll talk again next week at Cinda's. We'll give a video overview about synchronous instruction. And then next week, we also want to talk about the literacy graduate assistant partnership with IEP. There are some price increases, but despite the price increase, we think it's worth it because it provides us more support in the area of subbing. And it's getting very difficult to find subs. So we'll be prepared to talk about that next week as well. That's all I have, sir.
Do you want to start Cinda's meeting early?
What's that?
You want to start Cinda's meeting early?
I think we're good.
Okay. Are we done?
Yes, sir.
Mike has to get home. Thank you all for coming.